a number for the debt that we think would issue, each project that would be paid for with that debt issue, and the cost of each of those projects itemized. We have to have it anyway before we go to market, before we get into the bond. But with that, we'll have those for your approval. So at that time, you would be approving the list, the budget for those that we know at the time, and we would go forward with the issuance of the debt. So there is also an opportunity with a bond issue to reimburse yourself for some expenses. So let's say we get into this capital projects list and we realize there are some things that we can do before the money hits the bank. If we're going to go do that, then you can adopt a resolution that goes with all of the debt paperwork that says this is on the list, and you reimburse yourself for those things. So let's say we come across a project that is $300,000 in drainage work, and that's going to take place in November. Well, if you can list that on your capital plan, list that expense, budget that out, pass a resolution to reimburse yourself from the bond proceeds, and when the bond proceeds come in, you would simply reimburse yourself for those. It becomes a part of that. But you can't do it without that. You can't expend the dollars and then reimburse yourself without first approving that reimbursement. It's just a public notice that the money's coming back to you, and we'll walk through that when we get the list together. But that's we anticipate a little bit of that. We have a couple of things coming our way that we know, and we'll get into those in just a few minutes.
When will you know that cash out?
No, sir. We'll know the cash out number probably November. When you go through that, there's about a 90-day process to work on the bond issue itself, to do all of the paperwork that it takes to get you to that point. Then there's about a 90-day process for the issuance itself, for the bonds to sell. Once that takes place, then those dollars will come to you, but you'll know at the time that bond is set and is prepared to go to market, you'll know in advance what that is. You'll actually know the refinancing and all the cash. You'll approve that before anything happens. So you would know that at the time you approve the capital plan, approve the bond issue, and approve the financing, you would know at that time exactly the dollar that comes back to you, well in advance of any other action taking place. Item number 4, the federal stimulus, fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023. The city of Fairview, through the most recent federal stimulus, is set to receive $2.4 million, a little over $2.4 million. We're scheduled to get $1.2 million this month and $1.2 million in May of next year. Those funds have to be expended by December 31, 2024. So you can hold them for a period of time. However, they're heavily restricted. The guidance that we've gotten, and there's no official guidance written, they've noticed everyone that they're getting these funds, and the guidance that they've issued is a one-pager, and it says the funds can be used for to offset losses due to COVID. So if we had experienced a sales tax, property tax, or other decrease due to COVID, then we could reimburse ourselves that loss through those funds. We did not incur a loss. The only thing that we incurred was a slight loss, we think, in state street aid, but that's minimal compared. We're talking a few $1,000s, not a lot of money. The second use of those funds is you can pay what they have termed as premium pay for public employees. However, there's no definition of what premium pay is. One thing that we have seen was a sample of up to $13 an hour per public employee, but we believe that is to offset wages that would not or could not be paid during COVID. So we don't think that that's every employee gets $13 an hour for some unlimited thing. We think that's a reimbursement of those positions. If you had to cut a position, get rid of a position, or if there are positions you need that COVID prevented you from filling, then I think you could do that. But again, that's our loose interpretation. That's not anything defined. The third use, lumped into one group, is used for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. Obviously, the city does not manage, own, operate, or in any way participate in any broadband infrastructure. The state of Tennessee, in the state's budget with state money, has included broadband infrastructure across the state. So that would effectively move us out of the broadband spending business simply because we don't have that system. The other, water and sewer, we do have a water and sewer partner with Water Authority of Dixon County. What's unclear is could we partner with the Water Authority of Dixon County to use those funds for infrastructure improvements or other things? We don't know if you own your own system, if you can use those, if you can partner with your provider. We don't know what that is. But right now, that appears to be the most likely use unless there is some relief to what those guidelines are. And once that comes out, we'll get all that information to all of you so we can make some decisions. When the money hits the bank in May, we will transfer, and it will be direct deposit, we will transfer those dollars out of any operating account it hits to our reserve account. So those monies will go away. They're to be separate from any other expense accounts. Obviously, we don't have any expense account in our reserve fund, so we would transfer those dollars out to the reserve fund, and they would remain there until we get some guidance on how to spend those dollars. So. Right. No one has any clue. When I say no one from any clue, I mean that's no one. No one at the federal level, state level, local level. We received a one-page guidance that I just described to you from the state comptroller's office, but no one at any level has been able to give any agency across the country any guidance other than what I just described to you. And they've given us no window. So we'll simply hold the dollars until we get that. We did not show that revenue in this budget just because we will not, people see that you get those dollars, what happens to those. So what we will do when those dollars come in, if they come in May, and we anticipate they will, that would just be revenue in this year's budget before July 1. So it wouldn't affect this budget. And then once we did that, we would just simply expend those dollars out. Now, one caveat is you get into there, if you get $1 million in revenue this year and it goes in the bank, then it shows as revenue this year. If you spend that $1 million next year, then it looks like you're running a deficit budget next year because you're spending more than you brought in. But this year, you have a surplus budget because you brought in substantially more than you spent. So when we get into the auditing part of that, there'll have to be an understanding that for 2 to 4 years, you're going to have somewhat misleading. The financial statements are true, but the wording of it, you're not going to have a deficit budget because you've had those dollars come in previously. So as long as there's notice of that. Same thing with your bond proceeds. We'll record bond proceeds in this budget year coming up, but we'll expend those dollars in future years. So it will look as if you're running a deficit budget for all of the years that you're expending the bond proceeds when in fact they're previous revenue. So just something to be mindful of when you see that, and it's an answer we have to give to the state, but they'll understand that answer. Lastly, the item number B5, July 1, 2022, fiscal year 2023, budget compensation plan implementation. One of the things that we worked on in 2017 was a pay plan. We were able to revise it. We were able to clean up what we had. But as we discussed, or you guys have heard me say, a pay plan in most instances is false advertising. Pay plans look good on paper, but they never function as they appear on paper. They just don't work that way. And with the market being what it is for labor, we know we're going to have to make some adjustments across the board for a compensation plan. We're just not going to be able to retain what we need to retain, even recruit what we need to recruit, given the market we face. So once we get through this year, and again, we're not projecting any revenue increase this year, we'll bank whatever cash comes in, we'll move forward with that. So when we get into the budget year that begins July 1, 2022, next year, we will be able to install a compensation plan that effectively mirrors the market in the market community for all of our public sector employees. Obviously, that'll take several months to vet, to put together, but it will be important as we grow as a city because we have to attract employees to come to Fairview to work. It's very difficult. Every other area around us, you have a market of employees that you can draw from, but Fairview does not. We have to bring people here, and that can be problematic. So nothing to be considered today, but just know that there will be an expenditure in the budget that begins 14 months from now that is not included here that we'll have to be careful of as we go forward. So I think you guys know me well enough to know we're going to kind of be forward thinking with our dollars and make sure we're okay. So that's how we're there. So thoughts, questions on any of that before we get into the actual budget? We did not do step raise this year. And I'll go over that with you as we get into, we'll go ahead and discuss that now. Because we were concerned of COVID last year, no one really knew what that was going to look like, so we did not do step raises. In the 2017 pay plan, we included step raises that were intended to be each year. Each step was 2%. Because we did not do step raises and because our revenues were a little higher than what we thought they were going to be for this budget year, you may recall that we approved earlier in the year in an amended budget in October $1,000 per employee COVID stipend in place of the raises that they did not get. Now, the $1,000 did not cover what they would have gotten for a raise, but it was enough that we could share what they would have had we done raises, because that's the only thing we left out of the budget. The budget that you have before you tonight includes a 5% employee pay raise. The 5% covers the 2% they would have gotten this year in the coming year budget, the 2% that was not included last year, plus a 1% cost of living, 5% total. So when we go forward with that, the 5% will not be a step raise because we're going to go forward with a different compensation plan next year. We're not going to attempt to do a step. We're not going to do 2% step plus 2% step plus 1% cost of living. We get lost in the math, and the total becomes the total regardless. So this includes a 5%. That will carry us over until we get to the compensation plan in March and then go forward with that thing. Correct. It's just very difficult to do any other way. So you'll know our total revenue increase this year was substantial over last year. We're projecting about $400,000 in revenues this current budget year over last year. The 5% pay increase for this year runs a little under $200,000. So it's not as if we're overstepping with the 5%. We're trying to work within our budget and leave a little out there just in case, just as we did with the proposed bond issue, so we'll have a little extra out there. And we're doing that projecting no increases in revenue for the coming year. So we're trying to squeeze that down as best we can. So with that, if you guys don't mind, we'll get right into the line items of the budget and work across. And I'm going to hit a couple of accounts first so we can just kind of get those out of the way, and then we'll get into the big budget. So if you're looking at the document on page 1, you'll see the column that says total. That total is simply a check factor for me, and it is a total of everything over to the right. Just a way for me to make sure the math works as we go down the list. So for purposes of this conversation, let's go ahead and move halfway over to the page to the Bowie Park account. And we'll just talk about this account and its budget, and then we'll kind of get into the other. So the Bowie Park account, we're projecting to have a beginning balance on July 1 of this year of $84,000 in the Bowie Park checking account. We're projecting estimated revenue of $50,330. $50,000 will come from donations to the playground, which we'll talk about in just a second. $330 is miscellaneous revenue, including interest. So that's how we get to that $50,330. So if we start the year at $84,000, we bring in $50,330. That would give us an available funds of $134,330. Just below that, you'll see capital expenditures of $130,000. And I'll go down the line items for what those are in just a second. So we would expend $130,000 of our $134,000 budget, which would leave us a year-end balance of $4,330. So with that, let me walk you through how this budget works, and this budget for the Bowie Park Fund works the same as every other budget. So if you flip through to page flip over to the parks budget, and I'll tell you which page the parks budget is on. I apologize, we've added 2 departments this year. We added Public Works by itself, Engineering by itself, and Parks by itself. So if you go over to the last 2 pages that you have, you'll see some expenditures on the very last printed document, the very last page. If you recall, we showed expenditures from the park fund of $130,000. So in the parks fund, on the bottom third of this page, you'll see a line item that says capital repair projects, $30,000 Bowie Park Fund. This is on the very last page of the documents that you have. So you'll see $30,000 in capital repair projects. That $30,000 is to the gutter system and part of the roof system at the Nature Center, and to repair the restroom facilities at the park itself. The plumbing that leaves the restroom facilities, the sewer, is in desperate need of repair. The women's restroom typically is at 1/3 capacity because of the sewer system when it leaves the building, and the men's room is about half capacity when it leaves the building. So we're going to have to go in and do some work related to the grinder pump and to the plumbing that leaves the building to make it to the conventional sewer system. So with that $30,000 would make the restrooms functional and would repair the structure or structures to the Nature Center. Below that, you'll see a line item for park playground project of $100,000. Now, we showed, I see Commissioner Butler looking at this thing. Let me tell you why that is what that is. We showed in the budget, if you recall, we started with $84,000, and then we projected $50,000 in revenue, right? There's a line item we have in revenue for park donations. There's been some discussion about what happens to people make park donations to the city. Where does the money go? How does it work? How does it look? How does that function? So we've done 2 things. Of the $84,000 currently in the bank, we've allocated $30,000 to the repair. We've allocated $50,000 to the playground. We've secured $50,000 to the playground today, right? The other $50,000 in donations would come in. So $50,000 in existing cash plus $50,000 in donations would be $100,000. So what we've simply done is allocate the revenue to the park playground project and allocate the expenditure to the park playground project, right? Let's say that happens. We get $50,000 in, but Commissioner Butler's unspoken point, we don't spend $100,000, right? Because we're not there yet. At that case, at the end of the year, we would go back to page 1, and our beginning balance would then be the $100,000 that we didn't spend on the playground, right? Every dollar not spent remains cash in that project. So if we have $50,000 allocated to the playground, we take in $50,000 allocated to the playground, that's $100,000. If we don't spend that $100,000, it just stays in the bank committed to the playground. That sure, whatever the number would be. So in that instance, so let's say for purposes of this discussion, we've allocated our $50,000 that we have. We've collected $50,000, so now we're at $100,000, right? We have $100,000 committed to the playground, but we're not spending anything because the playground's not ready. We get to February and we get another $100,000 back on this refinancing, then the board would simply vote by resolution to install or to commit that $100,000 to the playground project and that money to be deposited to the Bowie Park Fund. So when that money comes in, you would simply take that check, deposit it to the Bowie Park Fund, and it's allocated to the playground. So now you have $200,000 instead of the $100,000. So Correct. We would just simply provide a recap of the deposits to the Bowie Park Fund. So at the end of that, so when you come in and you just simply get your bank statement, it is what it is. So let's say that someone's donated $10,000 they do that next month, right? They give $10,000 to the city and it goes to the playground. Well, we would simply record $10,000 as playground project revenue, commit that $10,000 to the expense, and then you would see on the bank statement a deposit of $10,000. Easy, yeah, easy enough for, there's no issue with that at all, so. But any of those dollars come in, and that's why we added those line items, so you'd secure those dollars. Commissioner Dawson, like you have a question?
So,
And it's up to, it's not budgeted to,
correct.
so.
What the,
You'll see when you get in the budget for the park, you'll see a miscellaneous projects, and that's what a miscellaneous projects would be. So let's say that happens, then in that instance, we'd file on our insurance, right? But let's say something happens that's not insurance worthy, you need to repair something. An example would be a footbridge somewhere, it's rotted and need to be replaced. In all of our departments, including the park, there's a series of line items, which we'll get into in a second, and it outlines where those charges would go and what the budget for that is. So we have contingency line items for everything. So you'll see something that says miscellaneous repair, park repairs, you'll see repairs to History Village, all of those things. They all have their own expense line items, and we budget for some version of that to take place every year for every one of those. Yes, sir, everyone, and we'll go down those lines in just a second. But generally, because the Bowie Park Fund is going to function in a way where we get money in that we know is not going to be spent, that just highlights to you how those dollars are recorded, how they're secured, and then how that information gets back out. So at some point, let's say we've collected, let's say we're now 3 years out, and we've collected 500,000, or whatever the timeline is, next year, we've collected 500,000, and now it's time to build the playground. Well, in that year's budget, again, it would appear that you have a deficit budget because you're spending 500,000 previously collected against a current expenditure. So as long as everyone understands that, yes, but all those dollars come in, and that's why we separate those. Okay. So that's generally how that works, and that's for all of our funds across the board. So with that, I know we have one other item to cover, so we'll take about 30 to 40 minutes and just run down the budget and make sure everyone understands how we function all this, make sure that everyone understands it, and then any questions at all. By procedure, the budget, we have to have 2 readings of the budget, so you'll have the formal version of this, including the ordinance that's required by the state, on the May 20 agenda. So the budget itself will be on the May 20 agenda. The second reading will be on the June 17 agenda. We're required by state code to have our budget adopted no later than June 30. So that's how that process will go. So when you get what will be approved, the ordinance will not be this document. The ordinance is a 3-page recap of all of this. This is what makes the budget up. We'll submit this to the state. It'll be posted online. Everyone will have a copy of this. But this is not, this document you have is the worksheet behind it. It's not the actual ordinance that will be, but the ordinance will mirror each one of these totals. So with that, we'll go over to page 2 of 24. Page 2 of 24 is the beginning of our revenue page. So with this, to Commissioner Dawson's question of how are all of the expenses coded, this is how all of our revenue is coded. So when all of the revenue comes in, we code that revenue to these line items, and these line items, we believe, are going to be accurate for this year's revenue, and with no increases. Again, we're on page 2 of 24. The only increase other than rounding increases that you'll see is item number 1, property taxes. Right now, that's at a little over $2 million, about $2,030,000. We budgeted that at $2.5 million because of the property tax valuation. So that's how we've gotten to that number. So there's another expense, again, for debt service. We'll zero the debt service out when we actually adopt the budget. So you'll see a $450,000 surplus, but this is how we arrived at that number. So local option sales taxes, those are the sales taxes that are spread across the city. As people buy things here, those are where those sales taxes come from. Those are the local sales taxes. The next couple of line items, wholesale beer taxes and liquor taxes, are up, not surprisingly. People have been at home for the last year, so we have seen an increase there. Most everything else going down the line is fairly flat. The next item that's substantial is in the middle of the page. There's a number of $776,000 in state shared sales taxes. That's a flat number compared to this year as well. So we don't anticipate we didn't budget any increase, but all indications are there will be an increase because we certainly had one this year, and people are all of our retail's up across the board. Moving down the line, the next item of any significance, at the bottom 4th of the page, you'll see $150,000 for city court fines and court costs. That's just that, the city court fines and court costs. Those are collected through the court and come to us. So everything else are smaller numbers as it relates to revenues. I will tell you that building permits, middle of the page up, you'll see a number that's $225,000. In the facilities fund, to the left of that, $226,000 in the general fund. For building permits, when they come in, those dollars are split on average about 50-50. That's not the actual percentage. There's a whole formula that sets those, but it comes out to about 50-50. The facilities fund goes toward capital expenditures. The operating fund goes toward operating expenditures. What we attempted to do a couple of years ago is make sure we're not completely reliant on building permit revenue for operations, because building permits can go up or down. So we safeguard that and secure about half for operating and the other half for capital. We don't want to take $500,000, put in general fund operating account, and then building permits tank 15%, and we're stuck looking for a budget number. So that's how we arrive at those numbers. And then the last number of significant size, about two-thirds down the page to the right, you'll see a number, $288,000. That's state street aid. Those monies are regulated by the state. We can only use those for state road projects, maintenance improvements, that sort of thing. We can't take that $288,000 and pay police and fire and those sorts of things. They're secured by the state for those things. We adhere to that.
What is the state betting, what is the sports betting proceeds?
It is exactly that, sports betting proceeds. That started this year when they legalized the gambling or do the things. We get a quarterly payment now from the state for the city's population share of sports betting, and it was just over $1,000. So for this quarter, I believe it's $4,000 on this document. So that's where that comes from. So go Titans.
So go anyone if it's bringing us in money.
Page 3 of 24, you'll see the top line, you'll see some numbers spread across. Those are just interest anticipated to be collected by each one of those funds. And again, we separate those out. For each one of the funds you see, the operating, facilities, capital, Blue Cross, adjusting, park fund, state street aid, tree bank, drug fund, every one of those have their own checking account. That's not just a fund we keep here. Those are checking accounts, and we mirror the checking account to the actual budget. You have a park fund budget, you have a tree bank fund budget, you have all these other budgets, and we have a checking account that mirrors each one of those. So at any time someone wanted to know, what does the tree bank fund really have in the tree bank account? It's just a bank statement. There's no magic to it. There's no huge ledger that you have to pull the number from. It's a bank statement, the number is. So whatever we say the dollars are on the budget are the dollars in the bank that we produce the bank statement for if necessary. So moving down the page, we have some smaller general fund dollars that come in. Surplus sales, that's just that. We surplus items, a vehicle that comes into the general fund. Surplus sales for the drug fund, it's just that. Those are monies that, items that were purchased by the drug fund, those dollars are required to go back to the drug fund. If 5 years ago the drug fund purchased a patrol car, it was $30,000 and we surplus it today for $5,000, the $5,000 has to go back into the drug fund. It can't come back into the general fund. Where the source of money fund was, that's where it goes. Retiree health insurance, $10,500. That's just that. We have some retirees, and that's their portion of their health insurance participation. Miscellaneous revenue, $1,000, because we always get some miscellaneous revenue. Someone will come in and drop off a donation to the city for something. We'll have an insurance proceed that comes in. Any number of things like that. There's always a miscellaneous revenue that comes in, or there can be a new source of revenue that we're unsure how to code. As an example, had we not had the miscellaneous revenue line item and the sports betting revenue had come in next year, we would have applied that $1,000 in revenue to miscellaneous revenue, and next year we would have added a new line item for the sports betting. And then moving down the line, the next substantial number you see is $115,065. We were anticipating in this year's budget to receive $230,000 from the state like we did last year. We received $230,000 from the state. We used those dollars for capital expenditures. We purchased patrol cars and some other equipment with that $230,000. A pickup truck for the fire department was purchased with that. It's one-time money to us, so we spend it as one-time money. In the governor's original budget proposal, we were getting $230,300 and some odd dollars. The legislature cut those dollars in half to $115,000, so we applied that $115,000 to capital. That $115,000 is being applied to patrol cars. So it can be used for police and fire. That's what we used it for. Given the fact that it's not recurring income, we're likely not to get it again. We used it on a non-recurring expense, capital for patrol cars. And then the last line item you'll see, the employee Blue Cross Blue Shield contributions. That's a new line item for this year. What we've done historically is not included in the budget the money that the employees pay for their health insurance. It was just an offset. So let's say we had $600,000 in expenditures for health insurance. It was booked at $480 if we collect $120 from the employees, and it was offset by the $120,000. Our health insurance increased this year about 10%, 10.5%. So going forward, when we know we're working on a compensation plan where we're trying to identify total employee cost as we need to do, what we did in this year's budget was we included the entire Blue Cross Blue Shield expenditure, which you'll see in the admin budget in just a few minutes. And then we offset that with a showing of revenue from the employees to show their cost. As we get into percentages long-term, we're going to need to identify what the employees pay from a budget standpoint and what the city spends from a budget standpoint. So we thought it important to include the total expenditure and the total money coming in rather than a hidden offset in the plan itself. So no change financially. It just appears in the line item budget rather than not appearing. The end result dollar is the same. It's a zero sum. But we needed to reflect it so we can accurately account next year. Next item, page 4 of 24. We're getting into the expenditures now. This is the expense set of the line items for the budgets and the departments. As we get into this, we added a couple of departments. Last year we had Public Works, and within the Public Works department, there were separate line items for the parks. We have separated that out this year, so the Parks Department is a separate department from Public Works. Public Works is its own department. Parks is its own department. We felt that was important, given the work we anticipate with the playground next year, some improvements and other things. It just made sense to have the parks be standalone, so we've separated that out. So Public Works, Parks, and then we added engineering Last year, engineering was incorporated into the planning department. But because those functions are separate and engineering will likely grow, we added the engineering department as well. So functionally, the budget is similar, but we separated out those departments and separated out those expenditures by those departments. So as we go down the list, I will highlight all the things that are of importance. If anything at all jumps out, please let me know. I'm on page 4 of 24. And right now, we are on expenses for the Board of Commissioners. It is what it is. Every department has salaries, wages, that sort of thing at the top of the page. And then as you get into their operations, you'll see that you have some operational budgets. If the board's going to do a presentation or award, if the board's going to have dues or subscriptions, if they're going to join any group or any other thing, that we include that there. So if the board came up and suggested that they needed to be a part of some agency or group separate of anything else, we have line items for that. We want you to engage as much as you can in those things. Each of you also have, the mayor and each council or commission seat has $500 in annual travel and training. So if there came up to be a conference, a class, some other thing that you felt beneficial to you as a commissioner, then we would do those things. So it will cover your travel, your registration, all such as that if you needed to do that. So there was not a lot of that last year, but as we get into this year, there'll be several across the state, across the region, and you do have the ability to go and attend those trainings, and that's compensated by the city. So I'd encourage you, if you find something like that, take advantage of it. We hope that you do, and that's why that's there. And then work session expenses, if they are, in case we have some dinner or some other thing. And then sundry is just that. Every department has a sundry line item. So if there's an expense that comes up that we weren't sure where to put it, we'll put it in sundry. If later it turns it's going to be a recurring line item, then we would add a line item for it if it's a one-off. If something came up and there was a decision made that, hey, we're going to have a meeting here for whatever reason, we're going to need to have red flowers at that meeting, you pick it, then we would apply that cost to sundry. If you're not doing it next year, it would go away, but we would not add a line item for red flowers unless it was a recurring line item. But every department has a sundry, and it's just a catch-all account. It's intended to be a catch-all account. The reason we do that, so peek behind the curtain, the reason we do the sundry accounts is because it's not uncommon for departments, cities, to exhaust a line item in a budget and then have money available in another line item. An example would be, I have a departmental budget for uniforms and I have a departmental budget for office supplies. Each line item is $1,000. So typically what's happened in the past is a department will spend their $1,000 in uniforms and still need more uniform money, right? So what they did in the past was say, well, I'm out of money on my uniform budget, so I'm going to apply $500 to my office supplies because I have money in office supplies, right? At the end of the year, it looks like we spent $1,000 in uniforms and $500 in office supplies, when in reality, we spent $1,500 in uniforms and no money in office supplies. So the reason you see these line items with $100, $50, whatever the number is to make sure our departments go in and code to whatever line item they need so we can accurately budget next year what they bought for that thing. If there's an unknown, again, if we're talking about we purchased red flowers for this thing, then we would apply that to sundry. Don't apply, if there's something that a line item doesn't exist, apply it to sundry. We'll review those at the end of each year and see if it's recurring. So the purpose of this is to make sure we have a place to put whatever charge could come our way, and we can accurately reflect it in the, not only this year, but the coming year. So that's why you'll see the sundry in every line.
The cell phone, $2,800,
Correct.
just a question.
That's for city commissioners who have a city-issued cell phone.
Okay, are there commissioners who have a cell phone?
I know of two. I believe the mayor has a city-issued cell phone, and I believe Commissioner Lucas has a city-issued cell phone.
Okay,
So, that's.
and it's $2,800 for two phones?
We budget a little high for that because during the course of the year, if someone else came in and said they wanted another phone, let's say you decide 3 months from now you want a city phone. Not saying you would or wouldn't, but we're going to need to show that cost. So that's how we'll adjust that cost. Now, when we get to the latter part of the year and we do the amended budget, if those dollars have not been expended, then we'll amend that line item, reduce it, and apply those dollars somewhere else. So that's how that works. We do an amended budget at least once a year. So as we get into this, we'll get halfway through the year, likely January. We'll review every one of these line items again. And if we see a line item that's over, we'll adjust. If we see a line item that's under. So let's say we get halfway through the year to January and we realize that only $600 has been spent in this line item. We would reduce that line item to $1,200 and then adjust that accordingly. So in all of our line items, we attempt as best we can to cover the unknown that could come up.
So is the $2,800, is that like the cell phone bill, or is that new phones every year, or
That's the cell phone bill.
cell phone bill?
And if someone came in and we purchased a phone for a council member, that would include the phone cost as well. So
And on that cell phone bill, is it like do they have just like a package and there's so many lines, or is that, since three of us don't choose to do it, that's just for 2 lines?
we pay for, we simply have a cell phone bill like every other cell phone bill, and it's just a phone with a line. There's no grouping or there's no grouped minutes or any other thing like that. It's just the budget line item for those things.
Like for unlimited?
Correct,
Okay.
correct. So, but that's why we do that. And again, when we get into the amended budgets, we scrub every line item, and if it appears that something's over budget, we address that. If it appears something's under budget, we address that as well. So that's the purpose for doing those things.
Just for transparency, I also have a cell phone.
Sorry, Commissioner Dawson does as well.
Yeah.
So cost just went up.
Figures.
Just
So I apologize, I couldn't remember.
And just FYI, the reason I think that we all have cell phones is because my cell phone has been taken before, and if it's on your personal cell phone will be taken from you. So,
Oh, I was told that
Not-
wouldn't happen when I chose not to
So,
have
so,
a city cell phone.
so in the interest of time, because we have a lot to go over.
I know,
Yeah, but I was told that would not
I
happen.
understand that. I'm going to clean that up. That is in fact not true.
oh, really?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, because if that is true, I want a city cell phone, but if
Right,
that is
so-
not true, I'm good using my own
Yeah, so
to
again.
save money.
So in the interest of time, that's not how that works. No one can compel you to turn over that item. What they can do via subpoena is have you turn over any information that they have. So let's say we get a records request and they say, cease and desist doing this thing, secure all emails for all that. Now, they can request that any email information be there or any other thing, but they can't take your actual item. They
But
just
you have
simply
to
ask
turn
that
it-
you secure whatever there is on that thing. So that became a little more important a few years ago simply because, and there was some question about that. Up until 18 months ago, the city did not have a secure email system. And the emails that we had were device-specific, not system-specific. So in that instance, there was no way to recover emails except for what was on the individual device. So if I received an email, a city email, it didn't show up on a city email server, it showed up on my device. So they could ask to see the device to remove any emails from that. Since we've changed that, everything is secured electronically. So they simply ask you to secure that information, but they cannot take your device to secure to search your device.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Sure. So we get an admin, administration cost, that's, you get into personnel. A cost, that's page 5 of 24. Again, every department has a personnel cost. They all mirror each other. We outline each of those costs, and they're fairly standard. They're personnel costs. Nothing outside of the normal in any of those. Page 6 of 24, you get into operations. We do things in such a way where we recover as best we can some big cost, and we break those out by the department that's accurate. As an example, halfway or a third of the way down the page, you'll get to a fairly large number, $67,500. That's the workers' compensation insurance. We cover that in admin. rather than break it out by department, because it's easier for us just to simply understand what that is. Workers' comp is simply just a calculation of your total payroll anyway, so it doesn't make sense to apply that departmentally. Just below that, you'll see insurance general liability, $160,000 a year, and insurance property, $16,500. Those can fluctuate. You may get the insurance bill this year and property insurance be $20,000 and general liability be $145,000. So you ballpark those as best you can based off last year, but we get it pretty close between the two, and they're typically not a budgetary issue or concern. Next line item is a fairly large line item, $624,000 in citywide Blue Cross cost. That is our total cost that we will pay this year for Blue Cross. It will be offset by the $116,000 in revenue that you saw a couple of pages ago. As we consider the compensation plan next year, we will have to look at what that cost is and see how we go forward, but that's just that's our cost for the plan. Moving down the line, you have some things that are a little larger numbers. I'll kind of run through if we have time to hit these again. Telephone and internet, that's citywide, $65,000. That's for all internet, all landlines for all departments across the city. It's just our phone and internet bill. Moving down the line to Commissioner Dawson's question, as an example, a few line items below that, you'll see a cost of $6,000, maintenance and repair, City Hall. That's to cover maintenance and repair anticipated for what could go wrong at City Hall during the year. Oven goes out, stove goes out, blinds need to be replaced, leak in the roof, whatever happens. You budget that $6,000 for those anticipated costs. We'll do the same thing in the parks budget, the public works budget for all those buildings as well. So we just simply take historically what those costs have been, try to best guess it from that information, and then put those budget line items in so we know we can cover those unanticipated or unexpected repairs. The HVAC unit, air conditioner goes out, we're gonna have to find those dollars somewhere. If we don't spend those dollars, then at the end of the year, it's just cash in the bank. You get to the end of the year, you didn't spend the $6,000 in that line item, well, there's $6,000 in the bank account to reflect that non-expenditure. Moving down the line, LGS, local government system maintenance, $35,000. That's our annual cost for our operating software for the city, our purchasing, HR software, business license, all that comes with there. $27,000 below that, email system. We pay a certain dollar amount per person per month. The reason that's important to us is we need to retain everyone's email. So you'll notice when you get this, you'll get a planning commission member. Planning commission members now have a city email address. Before, it would be scollins@gmail, and that's how we were contacting our planning commission members, tree board, tree commission, all those things. So now anyone that's on a commission, city commission, has a city email address, and we use that as our formal way of communicating information to and from them. That way, there's no discussion about what did you do on your personal phone, what did you do on some other thing. We have a maintained record of that, and that's why we do those costs. So, and today it's just a requirement. You're going to have to do that. Moving down the line, there's nothing of any substance. It's not just standard operating for the remainder of page 6 of 24. Page 7 of 24, Motorola system maintenance, $25,000. That's what we pay each year. Our partnership with the county requires that we do a system maintenance for all of the police and fire radio systems. That's an automatic upgrade. So when there's an update for those handheld radios and an update for the patrol radios, fire, what have you, those updates are prepaid. We're required to do this as our partnership with Williamson County so that we can maintain access to the Williamson County radio system. Two lines below that, Williamson County Dispatch, $72,000. That's the city's current expense for dispatch, what we pay Williamson County to maintain dispatch. That will likely go up $18,000 in next year's budget and $18,000 in the following year budget, simply because we have to pay our share of the dispatch cost for that. That $72,000 pays for about 1 1/3 dispatchers for the year. Given the fact that we get 24-hour dispatch service for police and fire, $72,000 doesn't cover it. So we'll have to go back and revisit that expense, but it is, unless we're gonna do our own dispatch system, it's just a cost of paying for dispatch. Animal control contract with the county, it is what it is, that's the contract they provide. Everything else below that are standard operating, and then you see the sundry line item of $2,000, and again, it's to code anything that wasn't standard across the year. Next page, 8 of 24, we get into the utilities. For operations for this building, utilities absent telephone and internet is $28,000 a year. That pays for your water, your power, gas, the utilities. Simple. You get into the next section of page 8 of 24, that's the debt service. The Series 2014 bond issue is just that. It's the bonds that were issued in 2014. Our total cost on that is $250,000. The cost of that every year is broken out at $107,000 from the general fund, $104,500 from facilities, and $39,000 for street aid. As we get into the bond issue for this year, we'll likely refinance that or restructure that as a part of the bond issue. And with that, all of that will come out of the general fund. We'll roll that into the general fund as a part of the $450,000. That will free up $104,000 in facilities and $39,000 in street aid as a part of that wraparound financing. And then below that, you'll see Series 2021. That's the new bond issue that we discussed. That $450,000 expenditure offsets the $450,000 increase that we discussed for the property tax increase. So when we do that, the property tax increase on the revenue will remain. The expense will go to zero, and you'll see a net $450,000 until we issue the bonds. I will also explain to you that the reason we will include this in this year, if we go to market in November or December, we accept bond proceeds in February or March, we're not going to have a bond payment due until after July 1 of next year, right? But with that, with our property tax coming in, and we know that, our debt service is likely going to be due, the first one, in September or October. So what we've done with this is recognize that revenue that comes in this year. We'll bank that revenue so we can make our first debt service payment in October of next year. So if this works, and all indications are that it will, then in February of 2022, we will bank $450,000 that will become an expense in October of 2022, the next budget year. But if we don't account for that this year, we're not going to be able to budget appropriately that $450,000 expenditure. So we're budgeting that $450,000 out 15 months ahead, just to hedge our bets. Next line on this, the fire engine lease, $50,000 a year. We're in year 2 or year 3 of that, I believe. We'll go over that when we do the Focus on Fairview event next Saturday, 10 days from now. There's $50,000 a year on a lease purchase. Motorola lease purchase, that's the lease purchase for the handheld radios and the radios that go in the patrol cars. Again, that was kind of forced upon us a couple of years ago. That payment is due in August of each year. So we have this year's August, $132,000, and then next year's August, $132,000, that goes away. So we know we're going to have $132,000 coming to us from a budgetary standpoint in about 14 months. As we get into the financial report tonight, I'll tell you where I think we can speed that process up and free up some money, but we're ahead of the game, we think, on closing out that lease. And then below that, under agency funding, we have a longstanding agreement recurring annually with Williamson County Health Department. And we fund the Williamson County Health Department $15,000 a year for their operations to the facility that they have here. And below that, this is a new line item. You may recall that the View CRC made a proposal to the board for some funding for their agency. They do some community work just across their agency or the region, specifically in Fairview, as they've described. I included in here, I met with them, looked at what they requested, and we were nowhere near what they requested just from a budgetary standpoint. I did tell them that based on the budget we have now, it looked like we could do the 12,000 a year, roughly 1,000 a month, or 3,000 a quarter, however we distribute that. But I've explained to them that that's what I thought we could do, and the budget has proven that out. So if you adopt the budget as is, then you will be funding the View CRC $12,000 in the coming year budget. So
What is the View CRC again? I'm sorry.
this is the nonprofit that came and made a presentation at a work session where they're just a community partner that donates. They help families in need and other local needs across the community. They made a request for funding, which was substantially larger than this, and I just told them there's no way we could fund that. However, in scrubbing the budget and seeing how we could help, that's the number that I came up with that I'm certain we could help them with, so I've included that in this year's budget. The next department that you have is municipal court. Fairly standard, again, personnel costs. Again, every department has that itemized as you see here. Then the operating, the municipal court operates pretty leanly. There's just not a lot, other than personnel cost operationally, there's not a lot in the municipal court that is of any financial substance or substantial impact. The next department, finance, again, same with the court. There's not a lot of expenditure for operations. You do see two larger numbers, and they're comparative larger numbers. $5,000 or $3,200 for property tax notices. That's postage for property tax notices. We have to send those out. $21,000 for the annual audit. We bid that work out, and that's how that has come back. And then $5,000 for Sturgis credit card services. Anytime we do a credit card transaction here at City Hall, we pay a fee for that. It's a user fee. We charge that user fee to the payer, but we have to show the expense, and that's where that expense comes out. Planning department, again, we broke out the planning department individually. We removed engineering from that, so you'll see an engineering budget after this, but the planning department is what it is. That's just our staffing for the planning department. Again, standardized cost across the board. You do see at the bottom of that $21,600. That's the compensation to the planning commission. That's what we pay the planning commission each year.
How many people are in the planning department?
Two. I'm sorry, three. Micah Sullivan, Brian Bissell, and Rachel Jones. Sorry, Brian. The operating side of that on page 12 of 24, this is where we get into some of the other things where, as we discussed before, we have some smaller line items and those dollars are there, but that's so we can make sure we are coding expenditures to where they need to be. There's not a lot here with some of this. The biggest expense you have with their planning department is 2/3 of the way down. Software, that's the IDT plans. Annual software that we have, that's $20,000, and that's just the cost of subscription for that plan and the maintenance of the system. Page 13 of 24, engineering, similar to planning department. Again, you have the standards for your personnel. The next section that you'll see on page 14 of 24 are the operations. There are a couple of things that you will notice in here, and this is information that will be helpful to the board. The largest expense we have within the planning department is about halfway down the operations. You'll see engineering services, cost of $50,000. Obviously, we're already paying a city engineer, so that's not the city engineer cost. That $50,000 will be comprised of two things. First is we'll occasionally encumber or encounter a cost to where we need to pay someone other than our staff engineer for some work. An example of that would be Otter Creek subdivision. Otter Creek subdivision was brought about early on, and we had a part-time engineer. Will Owen was the engineer on that project, and as a part of the approvals for that project, we still have Will Owen review that project on behalf of the city as it goes forward. He was the engineer of record when it started. We're going to use him as the engineer of record until its completion. It's just very difficult to switch engineers on a single project midstream. So a little bit of this, about $10,000, will go to Will Owen as a part of that project. On your revenue side of the budget, on page 2 or 3 of this, you'll see engineering fees, where when developers come in, they'll pay an engineering fee, and those engineering fees offset some of that cost. So that's where that is. So we anticipate 10,000 of that 50,000 would go to those outside engineering fees. The other 40,000 of that is allocated to the citywide traffic study. That's going to require some work to be done by an engineering firm. We understand that. But as we've all talked about, if we're going to grow securely and understand what our traffic needs are going to be long-term, we're going to have to adopt a citywide traffic plan. And that cost is to have the engineers come in and do that work. So
When is that scheduled? Do we have it scheduled yet?
we haven't scheduled yet, Mayor, because we haven't adopted the budget yet. As soon as we get this budget adopted, we'll contract that work out and get that work done, so. Next item is the police department. Again, salaries and personnel are what salaries and personnel are. You will see at the bottom of that, next to the bottom, you'll see a personnel expenses other, $17,400. That comes from a grant funding on the right-hand side of the page. The fire department does the same thing. Our police and fire certified get a $600 subsidy each from the state each year. That money comes in as a grant to the city, so we code that revenue as grant revenue and code it as other expense. So that's money in, money out. When you see that, that's not any source, but we have to code the expense, so we code the revenue for where the dollars come from. Below that, going down the page, there's not a lot in the police department on this page for the operating. Those are all standards for operating costs needs for the police department. You'll see a software license and maintenance, software licenses and maintenance, $13,500. We break that out, $9,500 from the general fund and $4,000 from the drug fund. That's an eligible expense of the drug fund. We code it there. The rest of page 15 of 24 are all standard operations for the police department. The next page, you get into a little more complicated funding of the police department. On the far right-hand side, you'll see expenses that are allocated to the drug fund. Again, those drug fund dollars come specifically to the city through the court, and they can only be used for enforcement operations. That's where those dollars are expended to, and that's where they come from. And on the operating fund, you go down the line item, and there's simply standard operating expenses for any police department anywhere. Fuel and oil is an expense halfway down the page. Maintenance and repair of our vehicles is an expense. $20,000 for departmental training. Everything else are standard operating. You will see in the capital fund, in the middle of the page at the bottom, $5,000 each for LISO acquisitions and LISO repairs. We code that, so if there's a cost, if we're going to get LISO equipment and there's a cost to the city for that, we need to itemize that cost. Or if there's a repair, if we're going to get a piece of equipment through LISO and we're going to use it, or it needs to be repaired before we can sell it, then that's what that repair cost is for. So we just simply offset that cost in a line item. The next page, 17 of 24, is the fire department. Again, standard customary personnel cost. You'll see the personnel expenses other, the $14,400, and that comes from the grant funding just as it did from the police department on the right-hand side. Moving down the fire department, you'll see standard customary operations. There's nothing outside the ordinary there. Those are relatively low cost. We will make adjustments as we go through the year because you may budget $1,000 for repairs on the pumper truck and $1,000 for repair on the brush truck. You may go through the year and the pumper truck need no repair and the brush truck needs $1,500 in repair. So we itemize each one of the repair costs. We will apply the actual repair cost to the actual vehicle. We do that so we can figure out when we need to replace that vehicle or if that vehicle is going to be some problem. So we break those out. Mayor, I thought you had a question.
No, I'm good.
So we break every one of those out. And again, just like the phone bill that we discussed earlier, those are over-under accounts. Once we get to the amended budget, if we're over or under, we will adjust accordingly to make sure we're addressing that. 18 of 24 continues to be operations. You'll see a couple of things, the hose and hose equipment. Those hose and hose equipment have a lifespan to them. So a hose can be functioning properly, but it be out of date, much like the same as you do with a turnout gear. A set of turnout gear is expensive, but they have operational dates. They're just like an expiration date on something you buy at the grocery store. So if something has reached its expiration date, we will dispose of it, surplus it. You may recall that recently we surplused a section or sections of hose from the fire department. We declared them unsafe and we disposed of them as unsafe, so no other department gets their hands on them or some other thing. So those are standard operating replacements that are needed to be done. Same with your stations as you go down the list. All of those things are budgeted for, so when you get those repairs that invariably come up, those are funded repairs. 2/3 down the page, you'll see $20,000 again in training. That mirrors the $20,000 training budget for the police department. We will likely make use of this room for more training for both departments. That's part of the reason we're doing the work here. But those are standard customary training and training expenses that we have for each of those departments. The next item, or next page, page 19 of 24, are utilities. Those are utilities for the fire department. Again, natural gas, water, and power. The phone bill is broken out into the previous phone bill you saw for the citywide phone bill that we have. Public Works, again, is a broken out department, and we've removed some things. The Parks has its separate budget this year. The Public Works budget in this budget that you see before you adds 2 employees to the Public Works Department. This budget includes the 3 employees we have now, plus a laborer position, what we call a crew member, plus an equipment operator. So we'll fully fund that. So we'll have 5 people fully staffed in Public Works rather than simply 3 doing that. That becomes critical for us for a couple of reasons. Number one, even if we're fully staffed, working something like the chipper truck can be really dangerous if you have less than 3, simply because of sight distance, visibility, work. In this instance, this past week, or last week, we run the chipper on Tuesdays. We had 1 employee who was sick the night before and could not come into work on Tuesday. And we had another employee who got sick while at work on Tuesday. That left us 1 employee in Public Works on shift on chipper day. That's an impossibility. So we've added those 2 positions. The difficult part may be in this, as we talked about, compensation plan. That may be a stopgap measure until we're able to get there. We're going to need to fill those positions, but that may be a difficult, we may have to make some adjustment there just because of the market. But this does fund those positions as they are in the pay plan currently. Everything else in the Public Works Department is fairly standard. About 1/3 of the way down, you'll see contract mowing, $25,000. That is contract mowing for everything except the parks, City Hall. Everything that's the right-of-way on Highway 100 that we mow, that we clean up, the circle at 96 and 100, all of the right-of-way along 100 that has sidewalk, the Triangle School, History Village, all of that is mowed on that contract mode. The reason we do that is because the $25,000 covers us for the whole year, and it's less than 1 employee if we were to hire an employee. So that's effectively seasonal, and we didn't see the need to hire a full-time employee to do only that work if that's going to be their commitment. We get all that work done with less than the cost of a single employee. So that's why and it's worked out really well for us. So just below that, you'll see fuel and oil, $12,000. It's just the cost of running our equipment. Down at the bottom of the page, over on the right-hand side, you'll see state street aid, maintenance for street lights and maintenance for traffic signals. Those are our actual maintenance. That's what we pay for those things. We're required, those traffic signals are on the state routes, but the city is required, the city owns the maintenance of those. You may recall we had a timing issue earlier in the year or last year at the traffic signal at Walmart, Adele Drive, where the loop went bad and it was causing that signal to operate. It operated safely, but it didn't operate timely. So the repair for that is the city's to do. That maintenance cost and operational cost is the city's. So we budget for those maintenance costs. The next page, 21 and 24, still in Public Works. You run down the list, you'll see right-of-way maintenance. That can be as simple as if we have to go out and do some work in the right-of-way, there's a drainage ditch, there's a pipe under someone's driveway that's the city's that we have to repair. That right-of-way maintenance is exactly that. Repairs to the Public Works building, invariably you're gonna get some repairs, some maintenance work that has to be done. Down the general operating fund, there's nothing really that stands out there except $6,000 for tree trimming services. Invariably, you're gonna have a tree blow over a road, some other thing. The most recent one that was a problem were 2 large trees that blew over Northwest Highway. We're simply not equipped to go remove those trees and do that work, so we have to contract that work out. We just don't have the staff or the equipment to do that. Over to the right, state street aid, $250,000 or $200,000 for resurfacing. $15,000 for road salt. We'll have to replace road salt this year. That's just our cost. $5,000 for roadway maintenance. That can be repair, potholes, that sort of thing. And then street signs, $5,000. We're required to replace all those street signs or other things that come our way. It's just a standard replacement cost for that. That closes out page 21 and 24 for operations of public works, except utilities at the bottom, and again, it's power, gas, water. Next page, parks. We separated the parks budget this year. We kept in the park budget this year the park programmer position. So the parks that you see are the park director, our equipment operator, this is on 22 and 24, and Nancy's position, the programmer. I know we're gonna have some discussion at some upcoming meetings as it relates to operations of the park. As I told everyone, we will continue to fund that position until we figure out what to do with it or how that works. But just so you know, when you pass the budget, if we go back later in the new budget year and attempt to fill that position, that position is funded in this budget, so there's nothing we have to do outside of that. Moving down the list, you'll see nothing really that jumps out except Commissioner Dawson's question. You'll see a couple of things as you move down the line. Example, if you go 3 line items from the bottom, you'll see miscellaneous projects, $1,000. That's exactly what that is. Something comes up or we have to make some repair, some other thing comes up in the park, we know we're going to have to go in and do that work. We fund that already, so we know that we have some source of doing that. If we get through the amended budget, again, we get halfway through the year and we've spent more in that line item, we adjust. If we get to the end of the year and those dollars weren't spent, those dollars simply remain as cash in the bank. So it doesn't go anywhere just because there's a line item for it. The cash remains. And then to the right, which will be important this year, we've talked about this for some time, but we have to the right of this in the tree bank fund, we have $10,000 budgeted for a forest management plan. We've talked about that for some time. Keith and I worked on that. Specifically, the person we had contracted for that fell ill. We were never able to get that done, but we know with work in the park and the other properties, that's going to come up. So we have $10,000 budgeted for the forest management plan, and then below that, $10,000 for various landscaping plans across the city as we get. So those are working numbers as we get into that. Just know those are budgeted. So if we get there, we have the discussions, and that's what we decide to do. There's no other work to be done. You secured the funding for that work. We try to give you the tools and the budget ahead of time so we don't have to come back and revisit these things when we're actually accomplishing a goal. Page 23 of 24, this goes back to the park as well. And again, these are standard operating procedures. You will also see to the far right a park master plan coming from the tree bank fund, given the fact that most of that's landscaping as well, and that those tree bank dollars can be used for that. We included also a park master plan in addition to the landscape plan and the forest management plan. Those sound the same, but they're not. They're substantially different, and you need to have those funded. So that's where those are. Moving down the line, Commissioner Dawson, to your point, if you'll look, you'll see about a third down the page, you'll see repairs, History Village, $1,000. Repairs, park buildings, $2,000. You'll see other repairs that come along. Trail maintenance, just below that, $2,500. A couple of lines down. Those lines are to answer your question of what happens when something comes up. We try to recover when something comes up before it actually happens and make sure our budget is reflected accordingly. Nothing else on page 23 or 24. That is what it is, and that's all of our operating account. Page 24 of 24, that's our reserve account. You may recall that I sent an email to you that described we were supposed to end the year, this year, with $700,000 in our operating account. We funded that last year, a year ahead of schedule. So by our ordinance that we passed, we were supposed to be, our reserve fund was supposed to be by this budget, $771,000 on June 30 of next year. So we were supposed to be 770 14 months from now, and we're at $1 million today. So for the dollars that we brought in, to Commissioner Anderson's question earlier, if it appears that we budgeted $2,800 and we've only spent $1,200, $1,500, whatever the number is, what happens to that cash? Well, for us, what we've done is take those excess dollars that were cash and plug them into the reserve fund. So if anyone wanted to know, hey, where were the dollars that we didn't spend? They're actually $230,000 more than you anticipated to have in reserve 12 months from now in a reserve account today. That's where we secure those dollars. Nothing is hidden. We'll cover everything up or down on an amended budget. If we get to a surplus number, we're going to forward fund reserve and let the decision be after that where those go. So we don't hide a dollar.
So, Mr. Collins, do you know in the history of the city of Fairview, have we ever had $1 million in a reserve operating fund?
To my knowledge, no, we have not. We didn't have a reserve fund until 2018. Actually, end of 2017. Before that, there never was a reserve fund. There was what they called a reserve line item in the operating budget, but a reserve line item is not a reserve. What was happening with that is they were just simply saying, this is more than we're going to spend right now, but in the lean times of the year, they would rely on that, and that's not a reserve fund, that's cash flow. So with that, to kind of answer your point, we've done two things. Not only have we established a reserve fund that started at zero, but you may recall in October of 2016, the city of Fairview owed the school facilities fund $525,000. So we refunded the $525,000, disposed of those funds according to that, and then since that time have banked the $1 million in a reserve fund. The reserve fund's separate from any checking account. All of our operating accounts, all the checking accounts you see on page 1 of this document are housed at our local bank. The $1 million reserve fund is not in the bank. It's in the state-sponsored local government investment pool. So to answer your question, not only did we not have a reserve fund, but the swing to the city financial over the last 3.5 years is $1,525,000 to the good. So, and we'll highlight that tonight when we get to the finance report. The next page, the next to the last page, these are not numbered, but this is your capital budget. Of the operating fund, we have some IT infrastructure that will go to the city. It's just that, some IT needs that we have to take place for the city. $20,000 lease property improvements. That $20,000 lease property improvements are to improve the lease property in front of City Hall to prepare for a food truck court, as we talked about. That's where those dollars will come from. City Hall projects, $20,000. Those will be used to complete this room and to make some improvements to the kitchen area that we have. So when we're done with this, this room will be completed, updated, and we'll have some capital needs we have to have for some maintenance on the functional side of the building. Moving down the line, $38,000 in ADA projects from the facilities fund. You may recall, some of you may recall that about 15 months ago, the city received $38,000 from a local developer who exercised the opportunity to provide $38,000 to the city in lieu of making some changes to some ADA sidewalks. The sidewalks already met ADA, but there were some proposed changes. You may recall that we made an ordinance or prepared an ordinance that allowed for someone to donate into the capital fund for ADA. So to secure those dollars, we simply allocate $38,000 in expenditures to make sure those don't evaporate to some other line item. So we know those dollars are there. At the end of the year, if we've done $38,000 worth of work, we'll have all the work and no money. If we've done $19,000 worth of work, we'll have $19,000 worth of work and $19,000 cash in the bank. And then the bottom side of that, capital, you'll see replacement vehicles for the police department. $115,000 of that came from the state money that was referenced on page 2, where we said that we have the state money coming in, $115,000. I said that will be reflected in expense for patrol cars. So that $115,000 is part of the $128,000 that you see here.
How many cars will that buy?
4. Emergency vehicle equipment, 30, that's lights, radio, siren, everything that's non-legacy equipment. Legacy equipment for police and fire is equipment that can transition from an old vehicle to a new vehicle. That's legacy equipment. Anything that can't be transitioned, the console in the center or radio mount. If you're going from a Ford Explorer to a Dodge Durango, they don't legacy, you have to purchase new equipment. $12,500 for traffic control devices. What we're gonna do with that is purchase the radar speed limit signs. You may have seen in other communities where it will display your speed, tell you to slow down. We can set those radar limits for whatever we want them to be. It will record that. We'll have a video on that, and it also gives you the red light, blue light, or blue light, where everything is, to let them know that they're speeding, exceeding that thing. It's just a traffic enforcement. When we do these, those are solar powered, and they come on a post that has a solar power. What we're gonna do on these is purchase the post, purchase 3 of the signs, and we'll be able to move those radar signs from location to location. So if having an enforcement area that needs some attention, we can simply move that sign to those posts rather than having to move the entire thing. We'll just install post once, and the enforcement tool becomes portable. So that's how we're around there.
You said enforcement with video, it's actually gonna, how does that work?
The ones that we've looked at they hold video for some time. So I'm not suggesting we issue tickets off of the video,
Okay.
but that's a whole other issue.
Right.
There's some discussion that can be a civil penalty, but cannot be a criminal penalty. That's why you get a letter in the mail asking you to pay when you sped through certain areas that have video or a red light camera. That can be a civil penalty, but that cannot be a criminal penalty because it wasn't witnessed by a law enforcement officer at the time, misdemeanor. And then $50,000 for firing range. We're looking to do that will be seed money, so we can take care of some preliminary design work for a firing range. A full firing range will be proposed in the bond issue that we have coming to you. Next page, fire department, $25,000, or the biggest number. Extrication equipment, operating, $12,000, it is what it is. $8,500 for some fire hydrants that we need to install on Highway 96. Capital Fund will pay for $25,000 for some Station 2 repairs. That's the station out on Highway 96. We need to rewrap that building with metal, do some electrical work to it, and redo the insulation in there. Public Works, $35,000 from capital. That's for a Ford F-250 vehicle that's capable of pulling the road equipment that we have now. We don't have a pickup truck that can pull Bobcat, anything that has any weight to it. We have to drive it on site. That's just not safe, so we would simply use that as that. Moving down the line, on the operating for Public Works, you'll see miscellaneous projects, $25,000, because they always come up, and drainage projects, $30,000. Simple example of that would be what happened on Glen Haven Drive a couple of years ago. That thing gets blown out, we have to make the repair. If it's an emergency repair, we need to make sure we have funds available to do that so we can go and do that work. So we forward fund those. Again, if those aren't funded and we get to the end of the year, those dollars transition into the reserve fund as been demonstrated by you on the reserve fund balance. And then everything below that, the parts department, we discussed the $30,000 for the repairs and $100,000 if it materializes for the playground. So with that is as close as we can get on time to line item by line item for the budget. It works for us. We'll craft this in an ordinance form, get that to you in an ordinance form, so you'll see the ordinance, which is a 3-page recap, and then this will be the supporting document that's submitted, but this is not what's approved. What's approved is the actual ordinance itself. This just shows where the line items, the totals come from. With that, I'd be glad to answer thoughts, questions any of you have on budget at all. If something stands out and you have a question, if you just email me, I will take your question get the answer to you and copy everyone so everyone has the answer to that question and know we're there. I will tell you that since we've been doing the budget this way, we've had, for the first time in Fairview's history, we've had 3 clean budgets in a row, no audit findings, no ongoing concerns. Fairview's never had, to my knowledge, it never had a clean audit, not to mention 3 in a row. So the fact that this budget has led to $1 million in reserve and 3 years' worth of clean audits is pretty exemplary for everybody involved, not just staff, but the people who've worked to do it. So with that, that's all I have. Commissioner Anderson, I know we had one other item on
Let's
insurance
move it
carrier.
because, move it to another meeting, if that's okay.
Y'all's call. So,
Because there's a lot of things going on tonight that I don't wanna, I need a break before we start.
sure. All right, well then we'll take a quick break and we'll be back in here at about 5 minutes till. Yes, yes, yes.
When you get, Mr. Collins, I have a question. When you get back, go. Commissioner Lucas, if you would lead us in our prayer and pledge, please.
Would you please stand with me? Dear Lord, we just thank you for this evening. We thank you for this amazing city that we live in. We ask that you bless us and be with us tonight as we make decisions that are in the best interest for this city. Be with all of us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4, approval of agenda and executive sessions announcements.
Motion to approve agenda.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Johnson, roll call, please.
Commissioner Lucas,
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson.
Aye.
Commissioner Butler.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson.
Aye.
Mayor Rainey.
Aye. We have no public hearings tonight. Citizen comments limited to the first 5 citizens to sign in. Ms. Johnson, will you give me a list of citizens who would like to speak?
Mayor, the first citizen tonight is Miss Candy Groves.
If you'll tell us your name and your address, please.
My name is Candy Grove, 7441 Old Franklin Road.
And you have 3 minutes.
Yes, ma'am. Well, first off, I didn't realize I was going to be talking in front of all of these students that I love so much, is so super proud of. But I am actually talking about something else, as you guys know. So the last time we were here, you opted to defer the Groves property rezoning. They did have some valid points. I believe the developer has met all of those points that were discussed. He has came to you with another plan that we fully support. We ask that you please rezone this property accordingly. And just want you to know that this property has been in our family for well over 60 years. So not just the Groves family, it was before that as well. Mr. Groves saw Cox Run come in. He didn't throw a fit. He said, okay, Fairview's gonna grow. We're gonna be neighbors. And as far as I know, he was a good neighbor. Also, Bowie was not there first. The Groves property was there first. The Bowie sisters bought that property. Wonderful, absolutely amazing park. And where that perimeter is, that's where they chose it to be, knowing that that's where the land was going to be. So I just ask that you please think about the future of Fairview. Programs like you're going to be having tonight that have been amazing at our school, we need growth for that. You need houses in Fairview if you want to continue things to grow in our schools. We have been the stepchild of Williamson County for way too long. We want to soar. Every single school deserves it. Your children deserve it. My grandchildren will deserve it. Everything that they say tonight, I want you to understand that I know it's coming from their point of view. I get that, and I appreciate that. But this is our property, and this is what we would like to do with it. And I really do hope that you listen to the developer, understand all of the changes he's made, and please rezone the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
Citizen number 2 tonight is Gary McElhaney.
Hey, everybody. I'm Gary McElhaney. I live at 7440 Master Shane Road. We're pretty much the northwest-most corner of the Cox Run subdivision. So in essence, if you look at it from, I don't have a map, kind of where I guess the new development would be, where that road, I guess, would come out to Wayne's Lane, where that bottom corner. So my job is to kind of paint a picture or illustrate more of the floods that we have now. Give me a minute. So I know, Mr. Collins, you're familiar with the area, so you might have to help me illustrate a little bit. So we have a 5-foot drain pipe that's basically under the property, kind of in front of the house. It's about 10 feet away. I believe it's the city's pipe, and it connects pretty much all of Cox Run stormwater runoff goes through that pipe. And you can imagine, it's a big pipe. So what happened was probably about 16 feet back from that, what's it called? That covert end, where it comes out into the middle of the yard, it's busted. And so the water comes up through the front of the yard and kind of just, I guess, pours out. And so when it rains on a heavy day, the rain kind of disappears that pipe. You can't see it. So it kind of just, gets under the water level. It comes out like a fire hose, essentially. So that's one of the biggest concerns there. So I guess my biggest concern with that would be, on a normal rainy day, drought, normal rain, big rain, it's always full of water. So when we do this new subdivision coming in, essentially, that water, if I can picture it, coming down the back of the hill would backfeed that pipe. So essentially, our side yard and our front yard would be underwater, if I'm trying to picture that correctly. That's one of the main concerns. So the issue I have is, before we consider this, or you decide to vote, could we have someone come look at that, at least that pipe? Made a few phone calls, I haven't got a response yet. I might have called the wrong Scott, but I'm kind of, concerned with that portion of it. All about the subdivision, but the amount of water that comes down is a lot. So when we add essentially 160, 170, 180 homes, 20 homes, it's gonna be a lot more water. So that's basically the only concern I have with that. And then, when you look, I guess, from the corner of the property and you look back, right? So there's a 14-foot elevation change. So in a drought, the bottom where it goes into the Groves property is always about 3 feet deep. So 8 feet from the corner of our house into that pipe where it comes out is about 4 foot deep. So if there's no rain, it consistently stays full. So that's really my only concern there.
That's your 3 minutes. I'm so
Okay.
sorry.
No, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Man, I'll do that one.
Ms. Johnson?
The third person to sign up, we actually have 2 people on this line, Mr. Elmer Mobley and Elizabeth Murphy.
Are they both citizens?
I don't recognize Elizabeth Murphy, but I'm not sure.
Okay, we can have the citizen speak?
I'm Mr. Mobley's counsel, and I wanted to address you, if that's all right.
Mr. Potter? Okay, you have 3
Thank you, Mr.
minutes.
Potter. Appreciate
You have
it.
3 minutes.
Got it. I've worked with elected officials, federal, state, lots of local, and their attorneys, and I know you have a hard
Wait,
job.
if you'll give us your name and your address.
Elizabeth Murphy. My address is on the letter, 1129 Glendale Lane. So I know you have a hard job, but I've done a lot of stormwater cases, a lot of litigation, a lot of consulting. I wasn't going to take this matter, but then I went to Mr. McElhaney's house, walked down to the head wall, turned on my camera flashlight, walked into the 5-foot pipe, gasped out loud, thought, oh my goodness, turned around, saw Hickman Branch, walked out, walked all the way up the drainage lane, which cuts diagonally through and up towards your new development. Walked back down, saw the storm inlet, which will be taking drainage water from the new development. That also goes into that 5-foot pipe. It's breaking apart. He told me he'd contacted the city. I don't know what all has transpired, but apparently there's not a plan to fix it yet. Then I looked at the subdivision regulations, I looked at the zoning regulations, and I put together a PDF which has been submitted, I believe, to all of you. Have you gotten it? Did you receive it? PDFs? Okay. And the bottom line is this. As I looked through your documentation, I could see that it was a zoning change plus a master development plan. You're doing both. The two are interconnected. They're tied together. The density change will affect how much impervious surface. The amount of impervious surface, concrete, determines how much more additional stormwater runoff you have from a field because it used to soak into the grass and now it doesn't anymore when you build things. For the city to protect itself, it has really great rules, but the master plan has to have, by your rules, 17, Article 17, it's in the PDF, it has to have preliminary stormwater calculations for a 25 and a 100 year. If those are out there, I have not seen them. None of my clients have seen it. When I looked at the plan for the packet that you received, I looked closely and it looks like little hash marks. I thought, well, those are the stormwater inlets, and they're just crosswalk identifiers. So from what I can see, unless there's something behind the curtain here, there's no plan from the engineer showing how the increase in stormwater gets into any of those ponds that they're drawing on the map. And you, under the regulations, as I read them, cannot approve an incomplete plan. That makes it incomplete, and this is premature. Now, can they still develop out there at some point? Once they satisfy your regulations, once they satisfy all of these items that are listed in that PDF, I highlighted them, I made sure you could find the articles they tack to, then you'll know for these people what's going to happen to the 80,000 extra gallons of water coming down.
Your 3 minutes are up.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Ms. Johnson?
Eileen Brogan is next on the list.
Evening.
Hello.
I'm Eileen Brogan, and I live at 7106 Brush Creek Road South, and I'm president of Friends of Bowie Nature Park. And I am here to talk about the Groves property plan. And I'm comparing the previous plan to the current plan. And there are some things that are better and some things that are actually worse. The better things are no more backyards up against the park, which is good. Roads, there is a road as a boundary between the park and the neighborhood, which is a good thing. The buffer has increased from about 25 feet to about 70 feet. It's not the 100-foot buffer that is recommended, but it is better. But on the worst side, there's one more house, one more rooftop, one more impermeable surface. There's no less rainwater going to come off of that property than the previous plan. There's no visible stormwater mitigation along most of the common border between the Groves property and the park. There is a pond on the eastern end of that boundary, but it's greatly reduced from the previous plan. And there are at least 2 lots that are built on top of intermittent streams, at least from what I can see of the plan. Now, the plan, as is available on the website at this point, is pretty, not very hi-fi, as you can see. So it's hard to really see what's on it. But it does look like there are two lots that are on intermittent streams, and that seems to me to be just asking for trouble. So at this point, I'm hoping that you will consider not rezoning, simply because this water is going to come into the park. There's also concerns on the other side, but I'm limiting my comments to the park. And I'm still very concerned about the park with all that rainwater coming down into it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
The last one tonight is Mr. Tim Rocco.
Tim Rocco, 7315 Cox Run Court. During the Planning Commission meeting on April 13th, I was encouraged to see discussion of changes to the zoning ordinance, including removal of the pod, establishing density calculations, and discussion of a buffer around Bowie Park. The commission voted unanimously to recommend changes to the zoning ordinances, and a reasonable discussion advanced concerning the park buffer. Asked for staff input, the city manager then campaigned for 30 minutes to adopt a 25-foot landscape buffer, and ended his solicitation with this unsettling advice. Sometimes you're stuck with what's the best bad decision I can make, and you're going to have to stomach the best bad decision you can make and move on. It's been my experience that if you're stuck making the best bad decision, you've undoubtedly painted yourself into a corner. This usually is the result of poor analysis, insufficient planning, and generally careless oversight. Decision-making is difficult. It requires gathering information and data, analyzing those inputs, and when appropriate, tapping outside resources to help benefit from their expertise and perspective. Many people go out of their way not to make decisions. Knowledge helps to empower those that choose to advance decision-making in their lives, but is it enough? How do you navigate out of making the best bad decision? Perhaps adding wisdom to the equation. And while you can be knowledgeable with another person's knowledge, you cannot be wise with another person's wisdom. Wisdom has an embodied moral element. It's not so much learned, but earned. I ask you to consider your votes tonight on the Groves property, not to vote for the best bad decision, but instead employ the wisdom you've earned and make a wise choice. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Item 7, public announcements. We are going to once again postpone the Arbor Day proclamation. We did declare that there was an Arbor Day proclamation, but the chairman of the Parks and Landscaping Board is not here tonight, so we're going to wait until he can appear and receive the proclamation. Fairview High School Mechatronics graduates recognition. Vice Mayor Anderson, is that you?
Thank you. If all the Mechatronics students would come up front. I think I'm okay. Hey, everyone. I'll let y'all take pictures. I just want to say a few things first. These students have been in this program since 8th grade, and they are now seniors. This will be the first group to go from 8th grade all the way to their senior year in this Mechatronics program. Fairview is really excited that this program exists in our community. And I can tell you, as a parent of one of these students, how hard I can't even tell you, doing both the college courses and the high school courses and the Mechatronics and just everything they've learned, and professors from Columbia State in collaboration with the high school. This is such a great opportunity for these young people. And I just want you to know that they have put forth such an effort through this whole program, and even compounded by our COVID situation, have come through this just, exceptional. I have some people who are gonna speak on the program that have a lot more information than I do, that have been just involved with the program from the beginning. Sarah Reynolds, who is at the middle school, who they started with in 8th grade. She was gonna be here tonight, and she just texted me a little bit ago and said that she had something come up, and she just wanted to let everybody know that she hates that she can't be here. But they started with her in 8th grade. Dr. Julie Boyer was the principal at the time when this whole program began, and she's out of town right now. So we did want to recognize them, as just being very significant as part of the project. So I'm gonna ask for Dr. Jones, Mr. Modajar, and former Mayor Patty Carroll to come up. They've been very significant in the program and have a lot of information that they can give and let you all know what these young people have, accomplished.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and yes, Fairview High School is very, very proud of these young men and young ladies. I have a little bit of information that I would like to read about the program. In 5 years, Fairview High School's Mechatronic program has seen outstanding growth and success. Fairview High is proud to celebrate the 14 students who have earned a technical certificate in engineering systems technology, and 5 students currently who have earned their Associates of Applied Science degree in Engineering Systems Technology from Columbia State Community College. Now, in 2018, Fairview High School was recognized as the Tennessee Association for Career and Technical Education Program of the Year, and our students have earned 1,418 dual enrollment hours, 1,517 dual credit hours, and currently, Mechatronics students leaving Fairview High School average an impressive ACT score of a 22.9, surpassing the state average of a 20.2. Moreover, 49.1% of our Mechatronics completers are first-generation post-secondary students. The program has also continued to grow since its inception, and at present, we have 18 candidates for an associate's degree of applied science and 4 candidates for the technical certificate. With the 40 middle school students that are enrolled in the introductory Mechatronics course at Fairview Middle School, our projected enrollment for 2021-2022 school year is 149 students. And as the principal of Fairview High School, and I can speak for Williamson County, we have striven to remove barriers for these students to pursue trajectory-changing opportunities, and that's what this program is. This program is a trajectory-changing opportunity. Our students are leaving Fairview High School able to go straight to the workforce or move on to a 4-year university if they've earned their associate's degree, or continue at Columbia State Community College if they've earned their technical certificate. So we are very, very proud of these young men and young ladies.
Thank you. My name is Mehran Mustajir. I'm the Program Director of Engineering Systems Technology at Columbia State. And I want to say that like 5 years ago when this program started, I don't think we were thinking about this to happen, and it's happening. And honestly, the program would not have happened without the cooperation of Dr. Oyer, Dr. Jones, of course, Columbia State, everybody working together. So I wanted to say that it's been an honor for me to be in your journey in your education. And I know from time to time we were kind of a bit hard on you guys, but that's part of the college. But I'm hoping that by the time you finish, some of you are going to go on to a four-year college, and some of you may decide to go to work before you go to college or whatever decision you want to make. And I hope you be able to put what you have learned into practice and make all of us proud, because truly, I'm, again, extremely honored, and thank you for being part of our program and allowing us to be part of your journey in education.
Oh, what an honor it is to come back tonight and just say congratulations to this group of kids. I was here when the discussion started, and the collaboration from Dr. Orger reaching out to Williamson Inc., the economic development. They saw the need for the program. A lot of the community members got behind it. Sarah Reynolds, Dr. Kevin Sizemore, Dr. Orger. It was just an exciting time in Fairview. Big thanks to Representative Sam Whitson, who wishes to be here tonight but didn't make it. He was the first person to go to Governor Haslam to get the funding. So such a big part. So this is a collaboration when I think of this. So very proud that this was not just a pilot program, but there's many other programs that Columbia State has partnered with and across Tennessee. And I'm excited for you. Way to go. You committed, you stuck to it. Parents, bravo to you and to the school. Dr. Jones came in. He just fostered this program. Congressman Mark Green and I and a bunch of leaders went to the school. Was it last spring, I think? And I was just so impressed from the time that when it started, and just it was a proudful moment to have the elected officials come in and see what Fairview's about, what y'all started, and what y'all are going to do with this, and just where we're going to take it. Tomorrow, Governor Lee's going to come and check out the school. I know y'all are going to make us very proud. Just throw in there, we need additional funding and keep the program going, and I'll do that too. So, but anyway, thank you so much for having me back, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Board of Commissioners. Thank you for honoring these students. What a proud moment for Fairview. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Patty. She stole my thunder. I was going to come up and say, yes, we are super excited that Governor Lee is going to come out tomorrow and tour the school. A little bit of history about the program. We actually received a $185,000 budget line from Governor Haslam. And since that two-year program expired, that money expired, every year we do have to fight for funding. So we are going to be making a pitch to Governor Lee to put it in his budget, a reoccurring budget line every year, because we are the premier program in the state of Tennessee. So congratulations again to all of these young men and women. We are super proud of them.
I wanted to let everybody know, and you guys, they're going to receive a certificate at the award ceremony on the 13th at the high school from us. So.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Congratulations, guys.
Okay, and now we have something, Dr. Jones, Fairview High School Principal on Fairview Athletic Committee Charter Membership Meeting.
Yes, thank you again, and hello, everybody.
They're tired of listening to you now, so they're gonna.
Hello again, everybody. Yes, my name is Kurt Jones, and I am the principal of Fairview High School. And 3 years ago, Dr. Looney asked me a question. He said, Kurt, if you could choose any school in the district, which one would it be? And I will tell you, I did not hesitate in my reply of Fairview High School. I grew up in a small town of Bridge Creek, Oklahoma, and I had 55 kids in my graduating class. On May 3rd, 1999, an F5 tornado ravaged our town, and at that moment, I saw the importance of a school to a community. And I was drawn to Fairview because I believe that it is the best-kept secret in Williamson County, and I wanted to work in a town where the school building is the heart of the community and everybody rallies around it. When I arrived at Fairview High, one of my main goals was to ensure that we were engaging with our community and tapping into the rich history and legacy of Fairview. I have a vision for our athletics, our facilities, and the level of success we can achieve in the years to come. But I cannot accomplish this vision alone. So I'm inviting our alumni, community members, parents to a Community Fairview Athletic Booster Club meeting on May 16th at 5 p.m. in the Fairview Performing Arts Center. Now, as you've seen with our Mechatronics students, academically, athletically, and in the fine arts, our students are excelling. My goal is to provide all of our students the best experience possible during their high school career. And athletically, we've had tremendous success with the Fairview High School wrestling program, bringing home the first state championship in school history this year in any sport. We also had 2 individual state champions. And we are equally as excited for the installation of a new turf football field beginning this summer. So if you are an alumni or you're a community member or a parent and you would like to become a charter member of the Fairview High School Athletic Booster Club and support the school that we all love so much, please join us on May 16th at 5 p.m. in the Fairview Performing Arts Center. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Item 8, staff comments and monthly reports, finance report.
Yes, Mayor, members of the commission. One of the things I campaigned on when I started here was a turnaround of our financial position with the city. Thought that was very important from where we started a couple of years ago. We were not in the best spot financially. So we made a few decisions at that time based on our earned wisdom in the application of that to ensure that we made the right decisions, educated decisions, to get our financials turned around in the right direction. As a result of that, I have a financial report for you tonight that will work in concert with the budget discussion that we had earlier tonight and will be elaborated on in greater detail at our upcoming Focus on Fairview event. But the report that I have for you tonight is a stack of paperwork that includes 3 things. The first section of the paperwork is a section of our March report for our revenues for the year. I would encourage you not to attempt to digest each one of these right now, although we certainly can. Each one of the revenue line items represents what was adopted in our most recent budget, so you'll see those in the comparison to that. The expense report follows that, and you'll see the expense documents. They begin with the administrative, or the elected official, city commission department, and they run their way down, so you'll be able to see the expenditures by line item of the budget as we discussed at the pre-meeting or work session. You'll also see changes in the budget. When we go through and adopt changes to the budget through amended budgets, we include in the budget report the initial expense that was approved in the budget. We include the amended expense that was approved in the budget, and we include the total that has been charged to that line item. So in the budget report, you'll see what was approved for revenue, what was approved for expenditures, amended for expenditures, and the actual amount of expense on that line item to date. This document mirrors in our software form every line item that you saw previously in the spreadsheet that was provided to you. The last 6 pages of this document are a series of documents that include all of the city's checking account balances from April 30, 2021, compared to April 30, 2020. I can report to you tonight, although unaudited, that the city's net change in cash position year over year as of April 30th was a positive $939,084. Now, as we go forward, there will be some expenditures that come out of that $939,000. We have some drainage projects we know are coming up, some unfinished expenditures for the remainder of the year. But I would submit to you tonight that our audit, which should take place in August, should show a reflective amount of approximately $700,000 in net change cash position year over year. I would challenge any community in our region to have made the wise decisions that the city has made over the last couple of years to put our financial position in the shape that it's in today, so we can start making proactive, wise decisions based on opportunity rather than reactive, unwise or potentially unwise decisions that have been made in the past. Once we go forward with the Focus on Fairview event, we'll outline every cash balance we have in detail, the use of those, what's restricted, unrestricted, the proper uses of those, how we arrived at where we were, and the future plans for those outside of the budget presentation that we had tonight. So that's the financial report I have for you for March. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have, and I appreciate your wise decision-making as we move forward in the process. Continue.
Any questions of the city manager?
That's outstanding. Thank you, guys. And thank you to the staff.
Thank y'all.
And I know that we talked about this at the work session, but once again, in the history of the city of Fairview, we have never had that much money in our reserve account that you know of.
As far as I know, that's correct. We've examined those books, and we have a plan for that as well going forward to ensure that that is our security going forward. But to answer your question, no, sir, I can't find that we have.
Phenomenal work, and I tell you, it is just amazing the position that the city of Fairview is in today, from the great work that the employees and everybody here in the city has done. So just amazing. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Not on the finance, no.
Planning report? Michael, I notice when you get close, suddenly the lights come on.
It just gets brighter. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. For Planning Department, I've just broke down building permits. I did previous month as well as the year to the month, both this year and last year. So far this year, we have issued 65 single-family residential building permits. We've issued several other permits, accessory structures and so forth, but this is just residential single homes. 65 this year, over 48 last year for the same amount of time. And then during the month of April, we had 17 as compared to 11 from the previous year. So we are increasing. We do have several developments that are in infrastructure stage right now. With those, we will see some increases in building permits once they get to that point, once we have a final plat and they're ready to build on. But that's where we are right now. We are ahead of the year, as you can see, and it looks pretty steady as far as the year as well as the month. Both are about the same. Turned in the agenda for Planning Commission, and that Planning Commission meeting will be Tuesday night. That agenda was put out today with that packet. So any questions for planning? Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Micah. Public Works?
Yes, Mayor, I'll cover the Public Works, item C and D, the city manager's report. As it relates to Public Works, just a quick update. We started our chipper service up April. As you're aware, we serve 4 districts, so we have our zones that we call them. We do those on the first 4 Tuesdays of each month. In the event there's a 5th Tuesday, that's a catch-up day for us. We provide the service with the 3 Public Works employees that we have. For the month of April, we collected 83 dump truck loads of chipped material. That's not the collection of material on the side of the road, that's the chipped material that we have. That's an unbelievable amount of work for 3 guys to do that and put through. On the second week of the month, they started on Tuesday and finished Thursday night. So when we start up with the first of the year, we expect to have more than we've had in the past, but we occasionally get calls for someone who lives in a certain zone and said, hey, we missed you on Tuesday, you didn't pick up. They're running the routes on Tuesday, but the first month of the year is typically a little heavy. So we did run a couple of days over on each of those weeks, but we anticipate that will back off some once we get to the cycling of the year. So those guys do a good job. We certainly appreciate all the work that they do. On the city manager report side of it, just a reminder that on May 15, which is a Saturday at 8:30 a.m., and again on May 25th, which is a Tuesday at 6 p.m., we'll have the Focus on Fairview community meeting. We encourage attendance from anyone who has a question about anything operational for the city of Fairview. We open up the books, the operations, how every department operates, how it's staffed, how it functions, what our financial plan looks like, what all of our objectives are, and where we stand on objectives that were adopted in the past. So we'll get that on the website. We encourage attendance. We'll have refreshments at each on the Saturday morning and the Tuesday evening, but that's the community's opportunity to learn exactly how we operate, exactly how we function, and where we are in all operational phases of the city. So we'll get that information out. We appreciate your participation in those. That's all I have for you tonight.
Any questions of the city manager? Any comments? Okay, item 9, consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Johnson?
Commissioner Lucas?
Aye.
Commissioner Butler?
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson?
Aye.
Mayor Rainey?
Aye. Item 10, old business. Vice Mayor Anderson.
Item A, number 10, old business, second and final reading of ordinance 2020-29, an ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance of the city of Fairview by rezoning 124.43 acres of property consisting of map 043, parcel 006.00, and map 043, parcel 026.00, located at Waynes Lane and Mangrum Lane, from RS 40, single-family low-density residential, to an R20, single-family medium-density residential, planned overlay development, and approving a master development plan, owners Corey Groves and Johnny Groves. Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion?
Madam Mayor, I want to bring to your attention the brief discussion regarding the letter that was sent today by Attorney Elizabeth Murphy to all of your attentions and to staff's attention. I spoke to her after she sent the letter to you. Advised her that I would take a look at her concerns set forth in her letter. And I've spoken to staff about the contents of that letter. The zoning regulations require for a planned overlay development to have a master development plan. And in section 17 of the zoning regulations, it requires certain things that must be included as part of the master development plan. And I've looked at the items that she's laid out in her letter. I believe that the only applicable one that is either not included or actually applicable to this master development plan would be number 1 in the letter, if you have it in front of you. That is the preliminary stormwater drainage calculations for the 25 and 100-year flows with the adequate detention and/or retention for each event. That's found in Article 17 of your zoning regulations as something that is required. I spoke with the developer's engineer, and you may want to ask him some questions about that. I'm of the opinion, based on what he's told me, that they exist. He has them. He may have submitted them to the city. I've not seen them. So if you have any questions about that, Mr. Sullivan's here, I think, and also the developer. Otherwise, the remainder of her letter, I don't believe number 2 is actually applicable to this particular development. Number 3, I believe, based on talking to the staff, that's been done. And items 4 and items 5 really refer to concept plans, which is something completely different in our zoning regulations. This is an actual specific master development plan. Item 6 is an actual traffic study, not an estimate. I'm not really sure what she means by that, but we do have a traffic study approved by a licensed engineer, so I believe that that satisfies that obligation. Now, obviously, as Mr. Collins pointed out in his communications with you, if you approve this matter has to go back to the Planning Commission, and there will be construction plans developed in that process. So any of those things could be fleshed out further, but I have an obligation to bring to your attention that I've not seen item number 1. That's what I'm doing. So if you have any questions about that, maybe the developer can give you more information.
Okay, so
Yes, ma'am. I'm Jay Easter with Reagan Smith, and we're here with the full development team. We submitted a complete set of preliminary engineering drawings along with the original submittal that went to the Planning Commission and addressed all of staff's concerns as we were going through that process before it got to the Planning Commission. The preliminary engineering drawings contained the required stormwater sizing, and those were based off of the calculations that were mentioned in that report. I will gladly resend the entire packet tomorrow morning when I get to the office if staff has not seen them or not been able to locate them tonight. But the stamped plans that were turned in with the original application were based off of the required calculations, and they have been completed. Staff has reviewed them. There was correspondence between the city engineer and the engineers in our office as we were going through that process. So we will gladly resubmit or provide additional copies of whatever information staff requires for the commission.
why don't you send those in the morning?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I will, I'll just ask too, on Article 10 overlay districts, 10.207 development standards for planned overlay districts. So it's got a master development plan of a planned overlay district, and item F is location and general configuration of stormwater detention areas along with general stormwater conveyance paths. So the master development plan for a planned overlay district doesn't, I don't think, call out that 25 or 100. And then I think we've usually seen it in the development submittals to the Planning Commission.
Right, Commissioner Butler. It's a little bit confusing from looking at our regulations. We have two different sections. Article 10 talks about the master development plan for planned overlay districts. But then if you take a look at Section 17, master development plans, it makes reference to the need for a master development plan for multifamily developments. That's not applicable. Manufactured homes, that's not applicable. And then commercial developments, that's not applicable here, but it's my understanding, staff has added to that planned overlay development. So we've got two sections, and this particular section, item number 1, is not in Article 10, not in the overlay.
No.
It is in Section 17 to the extent that we can say it's applicable to this development. And in talking to the engineer, he advises he's done that, and he's already submitted it to the town previously, so. But I have an obligation to tell you that I've reviewed the letter and what I think about the letter. So.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Potter.
Here to address any other questions the commission may have.
Does anyone on the commission have questions?
Mr. Easter, the one question we received earlier, the McElhaney property, I guess, would be on the northeast side. So you've got some of those lots that are drowning there. During your final engineer calculations of stormwater runoff, are you reviewing from that standpoint, if those top north lots are lowering down to that low area, is that something that is included in your review? Do you go off-site? Do you review where that water is essentially going to dump?
We review where the direction we are sending the water with our preliminary grading and the sizing of the ponds. If you remember in the original submittal we made, there was a stormwater pond here, and we had discussions with Planning Commission and with at the Board of Commissioners, and through those revisions, that pond has been relocated to this side of the street. All of these lots will be graded to drain towards the street. 2 or 3 meetings ago, I had an exhibit up here, and we talked about the ridge line, and the ridge line that runs along here, cuts across the back of this lot, and then runs this way. All of the water on this side of the ridge line drains into, I can only point one direction at a time, drains into the neighborhood. There's very little water, actually, watershed. I had an exhibit that had the acreage and the calculations, if y'all remember, that showed the direction of the water going. Majority of all of our water drains into our site, and we're containing it on our site, and then it is releasing this way because of the ridge line that separates us from Cox Run. We will not be directing any additional water towards Cox Run.
Mr. Butler, if I may also add one, the discussion Mr. McCanny had as it relates to the outfall on his property, that outfall is the beginning of a FEMA flood zone. So the FEMA flood zone encompasses roughly a third of that property at the bottom where the outfall is. So the ability to go in and mitigate that below that is going to be a little bit difficult. I believe that's why Mr. Easter and his team elected to go the other direction, not only to get it away from the neighborhood, but also because they don't have the ability to go in and affect that change.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm just going to try and hit some of the notes that were talked about earlier. So the new buffer orientation, essentially 125 feet or more will be the closest structure or building, correct? And so,
That's correct.
So any homes won't be within 125 feet. That road is your storm drainage system. And so with that road delineation around the perimeter of the park, all of that will dump into that road and be captured and then taken to detention ponds. Is that correct?
Correct, that's correct. It'll go to that pond right there.
And so the road essentially is almost one of the best buffers or collectors that we could have. So now we won't have any lots that face the park where a private property owner could, pollute or have, garbage in their yard or change the soils or anything like that. And then we'll also have a 50-foot landscape buffer inside of that on the other side, and then a sidewalk or walking trail on that back side. So you almost have a new perimeter trail of the park per se inside of this. And then you guys did add one lot, but it looked like you added depth on several of those lots. So some of those lots got a little bit bigger.
We did. The depth of all of these lots increased on these. We did pick up one additional lot through the efficiency of extending the of removing the cul-de-sacs and making the connections.
And so on the east side, there's two streams, and I don't know if they're wet weather streams, if they stay constantly wet.
Yes, sir. According to the preliminary regulatory constraints analysis that has been done, the only true stream we have is the one on the north. The rest of these have been identified as wet weather conveyances. Now, that has not been concurred by TDEC yet. That happens in the next process when we do a full HD and get TDEC concurrence.
And then they would have required buffers if they were?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think that hit the notes that were down from the questions. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Anything else from anyone else?
Yes, Mayor. With a background in architecture and civil engineering, I looked at this plan in the beginning. There were several things that I would like to see done to protect the people of Cox Run and our Bowie Park. From this new plan that you've submitted, the water being remitted into the development and not into Cox Run or the park. Also, taking out the lots at the very bottom, and like Commissioner Butler said, that road being the perimeter right there. I'm excited about that because I know that will be a nice, place for the water to go that's not going to go over into the park. I appreciate the, paying attention to what we had asked and the new plan that I feel has accomplished that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
And just
Anything
one more note I'll say, Mayor, if that's okay. Do you need to go? Okay, I'll just keep talking.
Go to the next slide, please.
One thing I did want to know is we continue to talk about stormwater. There's going to be continued additional calculations and reviews.
That's correct.
From the state level. Our city will review. And about a month ago, when there was a flood, about 10 inches of rain in a day, the home builder that's going to be building on this was featured on a local news channel for how they were retaining water in a subdivision in Nolensville. And all the residents were singing their praises. And this is a local group that I feel like really cares about their product, that I feel like is going to be a good contributor to the city of Fairview. I think that this community, I think, will fill a need for even current residents that we have. I think it's going to be a tremendous community if allowed.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'll sit down.
You may have to get back up. Is there any other questions from anybody on the board? Any comments? Hearing none?
I'd like to make a comment, Mayor, and just to talk about this property. You know, when we first started discussions about having a subdivision, in the concept, we wanted a nice subdivision because it not only borders one of our crown jewels in the city of Fairview, but it also is somewhat of an extension of Cox Run. It's contiguous to Cox Run. And we talked about lot size, we talked about the amount of people in the subdivision, and then we started to really get more granular when we started to talk about drainage. And you know, my heart certainly goes out to anybody in Cox Run and anybody in the city of Fairview that has drainage issues. It's a life changer, it's a game changer. I don't have much experience, like some people do on the board, with engineering and so forth, so I have to take into account what the experts have to say with drainage and so forth. You know, one of my concerns always is not necessarily density, but lot size. And when a community or a person purchases in a subdivision, and there is going to be a contiguous extension of that subdivision, staying and maintaining that same lot size is important to many people in the city of Fairview. This subdivision does not necessarily do that with the smaller lot sizes. Many of the other questions that the other neighboring neighborhoods have with drainage, for example, I think the developers did a really, really good job answering my questions at least, and walking me through, a non-expert, on what they're going to do to mitigate that. Not only that, but being good stewards of the park and trying to do everything that they could to handle the drainage, the noise pollution, the light pollution, and so forth. So just some thoughts, just some random thoughts. Once again, the contiguous subdivision, when you have a road going into the next subdivision, keeping those lot sizes, or the majority, were important, and something that I heard over and over and over again. But I do want to, once again, this was a wonderful exercise for the BOC and for a developer to get together, and for the community to get together and have a discussion on future development and current development here in the city. This is really the way it is supposed to work every time, to get community involvement, to get developer involvement, and to get the BOC ultimately who makes that decision. So, thank you.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Lucas, anything from you?
Nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Johnson?
Vice Mayor Anderson.
Aye.
Commissioner Butler.
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson.
Nay.
Commissioner Lucas.
Aye.
Mayor Rainey.
Aye. Motion passes. 10B, ordinance 2021-8, rezoning of parcels on Crowcut Road. Public hearing on item B2. Is there anyone here to speak to this? Is the public hearing is open for item B2, if there's anyone here for that. Is the owner here? Is there anyone here?
Mayor, Rob Mulch from the SEC on behalf of Brandon Robertson, the owner. I didn't know if this is my time to speak from the developer side of things, or if this is just the public side time on that side, so.
I don't know whether there's anyone here on the public side, so let's go ahead.
I appreciate your time tonight and your consideration of this reading tonight. Again, like I spoke last month in regards to this property, it's really just kind of finishing up the rest of the parcels that Mr. Robertson owns that are needing to be zoned to be concurrent with the one property that was zoned way back in the day when this property was originally envisioned to
Mayor,
be
if I
developed.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Chief, is there any way you could close those doors back there, Chief? I'm sorry, I was having a hard time hearing you.
Sorry.
Is your microphone on? Are you close to it?
There we go. Yeah, this made this easier. Anyways, but yeah, tonight is more or less to get the other two parcels Mr. Robertson owns to bring it up to concurrent to the same zoning classification as the third parcel, which is the furthest one to the west on that side. So that way, all the parcels are all zoned RS20 across the board on that side, which more or less will, by the time we get done doing the development plans on this, we're looking at about 1.1 units per acre density on this. So even though it's being RS20 based on stormwater and open space and such like that and the lay of the property, you're only looking at something that's more along RS40 development on that side by the time we're done doing design. So it's pretty much going to be status quo with the RS40, but just going to RS20 just based on stormwater and open space. So appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here to speak on this? Then we will close the public hearing. Vice Mayor Anderson, if you will read the ordinance, please.
10B2, second and final reading of ordinance 2021-08, an ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance of the City of Fairview by rezoning 48.05 acres of property located at 7425 Crow Cut Road, Williamson County Tax Map 046, Parcel 016.00 and 016.04, current zoning RS40, proposed zoning R20, property owner Brandon Robertson.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Are there any questions? Any discussion?
Mayor, if I could just have one note. I got to take a ride with Miss Langford, one of the farm owners there that adjoins to this back section there on the east side, and then also Miss Cannon, who's on the north side. And one of the things was some of the lots in Customary that's currently back up to it don't kind of have any kind of landscape buffer or anything. I don't know, when you submit construction drawings, if you could just take into consideration maybe some plantings or something that back up to those farms to help delineate the property line, because I think she's got a boundary fence there for animals and stuff. She was worried about people feeding the horses and things like that. So just take into consideration where that new residential is going to meet, the current farm.
We're speaking on the far western side.
Yeah, or the east side there on Crow Cut Road. She'd be that triangle in the bottom right.
Oh, Miss Langford in the corner, gotcha.
Yeah, and then Miss
On that
Cannon's
side.
on the north side above her.
I will see what we can do on that.
Thank you, sir.
Bring forward.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Ms. Johnson?
Commissioner Lucas?
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson?
Aye.
Commissioner Butler?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson?
Aye.
Mayor Rainey?
Aye. New business. Initial beer permit for 2 Thompson's LLC, DBA Thompson's Kitchen, 1880 Fairview Boulevard, owners Rodney and Gemma Thompson, on premises permit.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion or questions? Hearing none. Ms. Johnson, a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Lucas?
Aye.
Commissioner Butler?
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson?
Aye.
Mayor Rainey?
Aye. Item B, Resolution 06-21, a resolution of the City of Fairview, Tennessee, authorizing the city manager to negotiate with Williamson County and execute all documents related to proposed site improvements in Williamson County emergency service requirements for Fire Station 32.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none. Ms. Johnson?
Commissioner Dawson?
Aye.
Commissioner Lucas?
Aye.
Commissioner Butler?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson?
Aye.
Mayor Rainey.
Aye. Item C, Treehouse Playground at Bowie Nature Park fundraising and advertising. Commissioner Butler?
Yes, ma'am. And Mr. Collins can probably help yield the legal discussion a little longer, but essentially, so the Friends of Bowie Park are trying to do a program to where we're going to reach out to businesses and such, or they are going to reach out to businesses and such to try and gain sponsorships for the new park. And in doing so, there's things such as a future donor sign that will have the name. So we are essentially coming to the board asking, or they are asking if it would be okay to promote and advertise this business program to where if somebody donates a certain limit or amount, you can see the reference that I sent. Ms. Johnson had to zoom in for you guys because my fonting was bad. But we just wanted to get your green light and okay that it would be okay to advertise that and to have some sort of donor sign. We've talked about a potential tree sign with leaves. We've talked about bigger stones and the stone brick wall. So we're still trying to finalize exactly what we want that to look like. We want to try and incorporate it into the park to be a nice structure that also highlights the sponsors that gave to building the playground.
So I am working on the language of that brochure at this moment.
For the bricks and stuff?
No, on the language of the brochure that you have there.
Okay.
I think, because I can't really see that now, but I
think she
think
zoomed
that's what
in.
I'm working on.
Yes, ma'am.
And I don't have it completed yet. I promised Scott McCoy I would have it done by this weekend, and I've not, so I apologize. So if it's okay, if we could wait until I finish some of the suggestions for that. I do know also that we want to make sure that the city, this board, has approved any kind of promises we're making to sponsors about what we're going to give them as perks, because we're kind of committing the city at that point in time to do that. So if you would give me a week to finish that.
We won't have another meeting for 2 weeks. Mayor, I'm hopeful that with raising nearly $32,000 in the last 24 hours with the big payback, trying to get a push onto businesses this coming week on a, kind of as the ball's rolling. So I don't know if Potter could give us, are we okay to talk about as a donor sign okay is, I think essentially that's mainly the main thing that's going to be on city property would be the donor sign, and then the Bowie Playground website's going to advertise them as a donor and things like that.
Do we have the city logo on the donor sign?
On the what?
On the donor sign. My only concern with the brochure is some of the, and here again, I can't see what the grids are anymore.
They sent it in the packet.
We took those grids out for that grant application.
The grid was restructured to include a $400,000 or whatever, so it's what she wanted to do.
Right, but I think what we took out was what we were promising those sponsors that we would give them. I think that was the concern. Oh, thank you. I can see this. Whoops. Mr. Collins, do you want to speak to what the city is willing to promise sponsors they can do? Or Mr. Potter?
Obviously, I can't commit the city to those things. I think in hearing the discussion is just limited. I don't think the development of the trifold of the brochure is the issue. I think that's easy enough. I think the question is really approving the contents of the brochure, being the actual what's promised if someone donates a certain thing. I think that's really what's up for your consideration tonight. I think to both of your points, how it's presented, be a trifold or some other thing, is really not as important as
Oh, yeah, I don't care about how it's
as what's
presented.
there. Obviously, you want to get that out as quickly as we can and go through the stuff. So I really think it's just a discussion of the Board of Commissioners as to what first they're comfortable with committing to as a part of what's going to be in the playground. And then secondly, again, just some confirmation of the partnership in some form, how it exists between the Friends and the city. But outside of that, I don't really have a comment or a suggestion. I think it's all board privilege as to what, I know it is, as to what the board wants to include as far as what is committed based on whatever is committed. I just think that's where you are in the discussion.
So if we take this back to the Community Playground Committee and we work on some of the stuff that we're committing the city to do in the sponsorship perks, for lack of a better word, and we send it to you, can you approve that, or does it have to come back to the board?
No, I cannot. If that were to be presented to me, then I would take whatever those contents were, put them in a resolution form and submit them to the BOC for approval. I don't have the authority to accept any part of this on behalf of the city. This is purely a BOC consideration.
So we'll just go through real quick up there. So the top one, if you donate $100,000, it's a press release, social media post. So that's social media post to the Friends, to the playground build. It doesn't have anything to do with the city. They're gonna write out, hey, these guys donated and sponsored to the playground, to all the press release. A 4x8 banner at a ribbon cutting event. So we would have to say, oh, we're okay with a ribbon cutting event. Maybe that banner, if somebody gives it, it's at the Pork in the Park. So are we okay with a banner being there during the events? It's not a permanent banner. On the top two, you have naming rights to a larger piece or to a smaller piece. I think we've kind of visioned that as if you paid $100,000, you can name one of the bigger pieces, and it'd be a plaque on the piece that says XYZ donated enough money to pay for this. And then the website, social media, that would be the Bowie Playground website, the Friends website, and social media of those groups as well. And the donor sign is the biggest thing. That's going to be the permanent, long-term, where it has somebody's name, a business name or sponsor on it if they donated. So that's kind of the biggest thing that's going to be long-term on the city property.
So could we, instead of giving them naming rights, can we just say that they will have a sponsorship sign close to the playground equipment they've sponsored? Because to me, if I'm sending something to someone and I'm saying you have naming rights, they can name it the Tim Potter merry-go-round.
That's correct. If Tim Potter wanted to write a check for $100,000 tonight,
$100,000,
we will name the merry-go-round the Tim Potter merry-go-round.
The problem is, I believe, that the BOC has already passed a resolution about naming, so can we name individual things within the playground that fall outside the resolution of, this is the playground name, this is the footprint? Can we do that?
I think you can do anything you want with that. The naming of the playground was simply a formal naming of the playground for the advertising of it. So what was approved was the logo, and what was approved was the formal naming of the playground. I think within that footprint, I think the BOC clearly has authority to make decisions on how they would apply sponsorship, names, whatever visual signs or any other thing that comes in. I think other than changing the name of the playground, I think changing the name of the playground would have to come back to the BOC. And I think changing the logo of the playground, outside of that, anything that happens inside of it, clearly the board can.
But the board would have, that's what I'm saying, so, okay.
The BOC would be the ones to
Okay.
adopt that thing. So I think what you would be doing, if I understand all of the discussions, would be approving this document in its entirety as it is written.
Right.
And if the BOC approves this document in its entirety as it is written, then by virtue of that approval, you're committing the city to what's stated for the sponsorships and those things. I think that's where you are.
So I guess one of the questions is naming rights of the larger piece of equipment. If somebody did give us $100,000, I'm with you, as long as it was appropriate. Could we put in there with approval of the BOC or something of that nature, just for a little protection? I'm all for it too, if they're going to sponsor $100,000.
The vision was kind of a small plaque on the structure.
Right.
That says, I'd imagine if it's a business donating, they probably want their business name.
Yeah, right.
But we can't, I understand Commissioner Dawson.
We're just trying to build a playground,
Yeah.
Well, we're all trying to build a playground.
I have to say, I actually agree with that. That was the point I was going to make just now. Commissioner Dawson just made. With it being a children's playground, I would hate for name an inappropriate company to come in with $100,000 and do this thing. I mean, I don't see that happening. I'm not saying that, but it could. And so,
Could we grant this approval with approval of the name from the board? Or are we
Yeah.
okay with the donor sign? And are we okay with naming pieces with approval of the board finalizing the name? But we're just trying to get something out there that where we can start approaching businesses to be able to start building.
Commissioner Butler, I think we all understand that, and we all agree with you. Let's get it out there and get busy. But I think we want to make sure that when we're getting it out there, we're making promises, that it's stuff that we can live with for the next 25 years.
I think that's possible tonight. That's what we're saying. And we talked about this a little over a month ago. You received this document a little over a month ago, and then 2 weeks ago we added it on the agenda. Yeah, I just wish we would have known before so we could prepare.
So can we just add that tonight, naming rights of larger pieces of playground equipment with plaque upon board approval, and then we go ahead and approve this document tonight? Can we do that?
And I don't even know if this document itself has to be approved, just the opportunity to offer a sponsorship on a donor sign or a piece of equipment.
I think,
I think there are just three discussions at play,
yes.
right? I think, here's the dilemma that we are in this thing, and I say dilemma is I don't mean that in a bad way, I just mean decisions to be made. Again, we'll try not to make the best, worst decision we can make, but we'll try to make.
Please don't do that again.
I think I try to use our wisdom earned to make a finer decision. With that, I think there are a couple of things to consider. First, if this is a document, if the flyer itself, for lack of a better term, if the advertising document itself is a document that's owned, produced, managed, distributed in every other way governed by the Friends of Bowie Nature Park, then this board has no authority over what they produce or submit or otherwise advertise. So I think that's question number one to be answered. If this is a Friends of Bowie Nature Park document, then to Commissioner Butler's point, you have no authority to vote to approve this thing. If that's the case, if it's Friends of Bowie Nature Park document, then what you would be doing would be voting to approve the financial contents, the naming rights, the advertisements, or the other things, so that when someone does come in and make these donations or these other things, there is a surety by the city that that will be honored in that process. So I think that's really where you are. If this is a Friends document, you can't approve the document. It's not yours to approve. If it's a committee, if it's committing the city to apply certain things in the playground based on those donations, then you need to approve the contents of the document, specifically the financial contents, without approving the actual document itself. That would be governed by the Friends of Bowie Nature Park. So I think that's where you are. If, for my purposes, if to answer all the questions, I think you should answer the financial naming rights donations question, identify what those are, approve that language, and then whatever format the Friends puts it in is just another advertising arm for the playground.
Is it Commissioner Butler, is it a Friends document, or is it the public community playground document?
Ms. Brogan, do you want to call it a Friends document? That's where the money's going? Sure. Friends document.
So the money's going there instead of coming into the city?
Correct. These donations be going to the Friends from this.
So if that's where you are, then the only matter you have before the board would be consider whether or not the board commits to honoring the sponsorship advertisement that's before you tonight. If you were to do that, then that would be your resolution for the BOC to honor and adopt these sponsorship and naming provisions. And then the document becomes whatever the document is.
Do we have the right to add Commissioner Dawson's language to this, to the?
If it's committing the city, you have the right to name anything you want.
Okay. Mr. Potter, is there anything that you would recommend that we?
I don't have a preference about anything you've discussed, but as I've said at previous meetings, the only thing I care about as your lawyer is liability if the Friends group has some type of event, hypothetical, whatever event it might be, to raise funds and someone gets injured or hurt if the city has partnered with them in some way, in my opinion, it would be ideal for the Friends Group to have insurance and name the city as an additional insured. I've said that before. I don't even know if that's applicable to this. I don't even know if that's how they're raising money. But to the extent that that's something that they do, and the city has kind of, blessed this, we need to have some liability protection for that. And that's the only thing I've ever said about it. But anything else you've discussed is really, it's not a legal issue.
I would like to make a motion, the mayor, if we're done.
I'm sorry, what?
I would like to make a motion if we're done talking about it.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion to approve accepting this language of this exhibit with the addition of, and I guess the verbiage, naming rights of larger piece of playground equipment with plaque with the approval of the BOC.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to accept the document as written, except for the addition of naming of larger pieces and plaque with approval of the BOC.
And smaller pieces. Yeah. So the
Anything
fixtures.
with naming rights
Yeah,
attached.
that's correct.
Can you read that back, Ms. Johnson?
No, but in the interest of making sure we're correct on, because as we discussed, she's a city recorder, but she's not an automated recorder. So what we will do, if that's the motion, there's no way to repeat that. So what we would do then is go back, review this meeting, craft this resolution in a document form, and then we'll present that back to the BOC for signature. If it passes tonight, that's what we'll sign. But we will sign it based on the language that you just included, Commissioner Dawson, in your verbalized resolution.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Can I clarify, please? Because you said exhibit and then you said document. Are you talking about just this sheet right here, the donor sheet?
That's correct.
Okay.
I think what Mr. Dawson is saying, I think your motion is simply, city needs to approve the name.
Correct.
Of any signage or plaques or anything?
At the risk of beating a dead horse, I have one question for the board. I don't lean either way necessarily, but if we're worried about naming rights because of it being inappropriate, should we also worry about anything else that were media posts that we're sending out not necessarily promoting, but in essence promoting a business or an organization that we really wouldn't want to associate with a playground or with children? Should we worry about that as well? I'm asking that question. There's a lot of stuff going on with social media right now with all kinds of inappropriate stuff, and so I just worry about that with the city's logo being on it, even with the Friends of Bowie's logo. I don't know why she's laughing, but it's a real thing. I mean, I'd hate if Hustler of Hollywood calls us and says, "Hey, we're going to give you $5,000." Are we going to put their advertisement out and shoot it out?
Yeah, so to answer that question, absent of the city trademarking the name and likeness of Bowie, no, you could not do that. Anyone's going to be able to do that thing. Thus the reason that we approved the permitting process. So if anyone had any question, they could go back to see if they're a permitted vendor or a permitted fundraiser for their, but I don't think we could just exclude arbitrarily someone from using the name, because I don't think we could prevent it. Just
Second to the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is any other discussion?
I am hopeful a city of Fairview resident will hit the lottery this week and decide to pay for the playground. So.
I'll play for you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Johnson, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Dawson.
Aye.
Commissioner Butler.
Aye.
Commissioner Lucas.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson.
Aye.
Mayor Rainey.
Aye. Item D, ordinance 2021-11. Vice Mayor Anderson.
Ordinance 2021-11, an ordinance to amend City of Fairview, Tennessee Municipal Code, Title 7, Chapter 5, Section 7-503B, and to create Section 7-503C. Commissioner Dawson.
Mayor, Commissioners, in 2017, an ordinance was devised or voted on basically to support our nonprofits here in the city of Fairview. Before this ordinance, the sale of fireworks was prohibited, and a commissioner put this in front of the BOC to allow our nonprofits to fund themselves by the selling of fireworks. And what we're proposing today is just to kind of tighten the rules around allowing our nonprofits to sell fireworks in the city of Fairview. In the past, big box fireworks sales or companies have been allowed to come in, which is kind of defeating the purpose of the ordinance in itself. The nonprofits that are selling fireworks in the city of Fairview provide thousands of dollars to citizens here in the city of Fairview that are less fortunate. They do great work with all of the money that they obtain by selling these fireworks. So this verbiage in this new ordinance is just kind of tightening the rules around the sale of fireworks in the city of Fairview, just specifically for our nonprofits that have an address, that provide services here in the city, and do the work of the people here in the city of Fairview. And there is one, I know that you were provided the change, but I also wanted to add, so proof of valid IRS 501c3 or 501c19 tax exempt status shall be required for any person and or entity proposing the sale of fireworks. The city of Fairview shall issue no permit for the sale of fireworks unless the applicant has first provided documentation that is a registered nonprofit organization with a certificate of incorporation and federal employer identification number, can attest to having a physical address, business address within the city of Fairview, and has further provided documentation of proof of providing nonprofit community services to the city of Fairview. Said nonprofit organization must be listed as the owner of the state of Tennessee seasonal retail firework license. And that would be the change.
Is this a change also on the first page? It shall be unlawful for any person other than a person who is a member of a registered nonprofit?
That's correct. That is another change.
So how does city staff verify, I mean, if, and not that they will, I promise, but if Meals on Wheels were to decide to apply for a permit to sell fireworks, how would we prove we were a member of Meals on Wheels? How would the city verify that?
Yeah, so they would, if for some reason somebody were to come to the city and say they are not abiding by the rules, we could ask for a roster or a list of membership, whatever that looks like.
But we don't have, I mean, a lot of nonprofits do not necessarily have members, and they don't have a roster. So isn't that kind of?
I think it would be important that they're a member of the 501c3. And I think that the majority of the nonprofits have some type of membership role or something.
Mayor, if I could, I'll get back to the member thing in a second. The one part that does bother me, I've been very clear from day one. I think we either sell fireworks or we don't. I was here for 2017. I appreciate what then Vice Mayor Crutcher was attempting to do. I just didn't like, not to go back into it, I didn't like that nonprofits could and for-profits couldn't. I just didn't like that. And so my thought process has always been we either sell or we don't. But the part about having to have a physical address in the city of Fairview, there are a lot of nonprofits that I've worked with that do not have that do a lot of work in Fairview that do not have a physical address in Fairview, Graceworks being one of them. They do a ton of stuff in Fairview, feed a lot of people, at least one Saturday a month, but they don't have a physical address in Fairview. I don't know that, maybe you could correct me, I don't think United Way has a physical address in Fairview. I don't believe that Meals on Wheels has a physical address in Fairview. Not saying that any of those organizations would necessarily want to do fireworks sales, but if they wanted to, they couldn't. And so that part bothers me as well. The membership thing, I agree with that as well. I don't know how you prove Graceworks doesn't have members. They have 270-ish volunteers every week. That continually changes. They have a core group of people that probably are pretty consistent with their volunteering. But I don't know how you, as a city staff, how we prove that part of it. So those parts of the language bother me if we were to move forward with part of this.
I think if you have to require proof of insurance, you have to go and pull a permit, like a state permit to sell fireworks. Is that correct? So you'd have to be a member of one of those organizations to be able to take the steps to pull those under that company, I would think.
Yeah, and if Graceworks wants to sell fireworks, or if any nonprofit, you can get a P.O. box. That's a very small hurdle when we talk about not allowing a nonprofit to sell fireworks. And I think everybody that sells, any nonprofit in the city of Fairview that sells fireworks is more than happy for any nonprofit to have that same opportunity. So the physical address, I don't think, is a significant hurdle. I think that's easy. And I think the whole premise behind the membership is making sure that a nonprofit doesn't ask a large box fireworks vendor to come in and sell on their behalf, and then all of that money leave the city of Fairview when it could be used for the great things here in the city.
Well, I think it also says that a member, that if you're not a member, you cannot volunteer and work at the tent. Is that what I'm reading? Am I reading that properly? It shall further be unlawful for any person issued said permit to allow any individual who is not also a member of the same registered nonprofit organization to work in the tent.
Correct. So if you're not a registered member of that nonprofit, you cannot work in the tent.
But here again, Mr. Potter, am I correct? If we include that language, then if Graceworks were to have a tent and they don't have membership, then could they have volunteers in that tent working, or does that language exclude that?
I don't want to put words in Commissioner Dawson's mouth, but I think membership would mean affiliated with or part of the organization.
Well, I understand that, but on
Would necessarily
paper,
need a membership card or something like that, but you could be affiliated with. I think is that right, Mr.
That is correct. Yeah.
well, then do we need to change the language in the ordinance?
I don't think so.
I think that's a minor change, so I think you could make a motion to approve it and say in lieu of membership must be a member of or affiliated with. That's what you wish to do. It would be more clear.
So in this language, would I be allowed to volunteer to help the American Legion? I see them all here. They sell fireworks.
Please.
Would I be allowed to volunteer my time to help them sell fireworks at their tent?
Arguably, no.
If you were a member, you would.
Can't be a member of the American Legion. I'm not a.
That's your answer. I mean, that's membership.
So can anyone in here be a member of Graceworks United Way? What determines them being a member? And to your point about just getting a P.O. box to have a physical address, we go back to the point again. We've made this so muddy. This is why I say I believe we should either sell or not sell. Any nonprofit can get a physical address in Fairview as well and get a P.O. box.
That's correct.
And there a waiting list for P.O. boxes?
A P.O. box is not a physical address.
Well,
The only
Dawson-
business in
Dawson just said
Fairview
it
that
was.
has a physical address is going postal. No P.O. box from a post office is a physical address.
Okay. Well, Commissioner Dawson just said they could easily get a P.O. box
Yeah.
and beat that hurdle. So,
Well, they
that-
come to
again,
me.
the language of
Yeah,
this
correct.
thing, we can't even, as five of us up here, we can't even agree with the language of this thing. And now we're expecting the city staff to go out and police something that we can't even agree on.
I think we can agree on it. I think it's easily agreed. Membership is, do you operate or work with those folks? And I don't think this is muddy at all. I think it's an opportunity for any Fairview nonprofit to have the ability to sell fireworks. And it's also, I think, an opportunity for our current folks that sell fireworks to be able to be funded. So.
I thought does this ordinance not say nonprofits can sell fireworks? The 2017-05?
Does, we just added more verbiage to it, Mayor.
Correct. And it seems that's where the confusion starts, that this ordinance has worked for since 2017, I presume. And now we're adding language that we all kind of are, I think, a lot of us, some of us, feel is kind of muddying the waters. So what was wrong with the 2017-05 ordinance?
The issue is a nonprofit currently with this ordinance can sub out the sale of fireworks. They don't have to actually work in the tent, and they can sub out the sale to a big box. That big box store can come here to the city of Fairview and sell those fireworks, and all of that money it will then leave the city of Fairview instead of going to that nonprofit that can fund certain initiatives here in the city of Fairview.
Well, I tend to think that if a nonprofit, they would get some money from that sale, kind of like Nando's giving us 10% to the playground. So, and that money would stay here in Fairview or not. I mean, I just think that this new resolution really muddies the resolution that's worked for the last few years. And the only thing we seem that this one addresses is the ability for a small nonprofit to get someone else to do the sales, right? Am I correct?
That's correct. But we're trying to keep the money in our nonprofits' hands. That's correct.
How many permits were pulled for fireworks last year?
Commissioner, I couldn't answer that question right here. Less than half dozen, probably. I can get you the information, I just don't have it before me tonight.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion? Ms. Johnson?
Commissioner Butler?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson?
Aye.
Commissioner Dawson?
Aye.
Commissioner Lucas?
Nay.
Mayor Rainey?
No. Motion passes. Communications from the board, from the mayor and commissioners. I'm so sorry, I've forgotten who we are. Commissioner Butler.
Thank you, Mayor. And we'll just make the announcement. I don't know if we have the final number yet, and it looks like they've left, but the Friends did raise a little over $30,000 of the big payback in the last 24 hours, which is pretty tremendous.
Good job.
And then, as Mr. Collins notated, we have Focus on Fairview coming up, 2 opportunities to come, a weekend opportunity, a night opportunity. I hope he takes the time to brag on himself, to brag on our staff and all the strides we're making, because we don't get to talk about that as much. It's always just kind of what's wrong and how can we fix it. But we've improved so much, and a lot of that's at his hands, so we just want to make sure that everybody comes and joins, hears what's going on, and see what's coming for the future of Fairview. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Lucas.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to, again, congratulate all those high school students that were here tonight. That's a big deal. No matter where you go in the Middle Tennessee area, people talk about that program. Congratulations to all of our seniors. I can't remember if we have a meeting prior to graduation or not. I think, yes, we do.
The day before.
Yeah, the day before. Congratulations to all those seniors that are going to be graduating and moving on to that next step. Again, to Commissioner Butler's point, congratulations. A lot of money raised in the last 24 hours for the playground. That's a big deal. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Fairview, of all the places that I've lived, is probably one of the most giving group of people. And that shows today over the last 24 hours for that playground build. I think we're going to have that thing funded pretty quick. So big thank you to all of those working behind the scenes. I won't begin to name names because I'll forget somebody and somebody will get mad at me. But thank you to all those working behind the scenes to make that happen. And then finally, thank you to the city staff. If you look at this budget, to Mr. Collins' point, we have come a long way. You don't believe it, ask anybody here at City Hall. When you see him on the street, when you see him in Walmart, see him at the park, wherever, ask them how far we've come in a pretty short period of time. And so I think a lot of the credit goes to the city manager and those behind the scenes. So thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. That's all I have tonight, Mary. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Dawson?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to comment on the city of Fairview and how far that we have come. It just amazes me. It seems every board, every staff member has made this city better and better and better every year. It builds upon itself. And here we are today with $1 million in our reserve account. We have strong strategic growth, and it's amazing. It's a beautiful, wonderful city to live in. It's a great community to be involved in. We have so many great things happening. The Mechatronics program here in the city of Fairview, in the high school, is the only one in Williamson County. And we look at some of our neighboring and sister cities, and people are like, oh, well, we would really like to go there to school. We now have something so special here in the city of Fairview that parents and their children are looking to the city of Fairview to get involved in the high school. We are now putting our stake in the sand and showing them everything that the city of Fairview is made of. So I'm just so excited about our future. Great things are to come, for sure. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I want to second everything everyone has said here tonight. It is good that Mr. Collins' stinginess with the budget has gotten us to the point that when something happens, we have money to fix it. I appreciate all you've done and what your staff has done. The high school program is wonderful. Vice Mayor Anderson, thank you very much for organizing that celebration of that event tonight. It was good to see all those kids, although I did notice there were no girls in it.
Well, there are. They just,
They didn't show up.
They didn't show up tonight.
So thank you very much. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Can I?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Did I miss you?
You did, but
I'm
it's
so-
okay.
No, no,
I
okay.
just
No,
got
no,
a
no.
couple
Go, I'm
things.
so sorry. Go ahead.
She's getting old.
Shut up. Yes, I am.
I would just like to say that I'm so proud of all these students to commit to this program, the Mechatronics students, to commit to this program from 8th grade all the way through your senior year with everything that encompasses. I mean, you have no idea. My son's involved in the program. He's graduating this year. He is going to get his associate's degree from Columbia State Community College at no cost to me. The school, through grants, paid for all of it. So he can either go out into the workforce right now. Companies have already talked to them. I'm talking $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year just with that degree. And then if he has chosen to go on to college to get his bachelor's degree, so he'll be doing that in the fall. But some of the students, if they choose to just go into the Mechatronics path that way and not to continue on with college, or they can continue on with college, or whatever they choose to do, this program has helped them do that. And it's so exciting that we're the only school in Williamson County that has this program, because so many other schools have different programs, but this one is just right up there at the top. So I'm just commend them. And also, I wanted to, Coach Sizemore couldn't be here tonight. He is actually the teacher who is with them every single day, working with them, and helping see that they stay on on target and get everything done. And trust me, it's a lot to achieve their goal with this. The decision for me tonight, I know on the Groves property, I know that it was hard for everybody. We have to make choices, but I just want to say that the developer, when the plan came to us, there were a lot of changes that I felt like needed to be made to protect the park, to protect Cox Run subdivision. And in my opinion, I feel like the plan as it is today has, met what my concerns were. That is the reason I said yes. I really appreciate the fact that the community came out and, they were involved, the developer and his team, they were involved, and the board, we were all involved. And we worked as a group and, got to listen and do the best for each other in this project. We have, on another note, we have signs. If anybody wants them, I usually have them over at my shop that are for the raising funds for the playground. They're the Proud Supporter signs. So I just encourage everyone, that's a great way to give. And, you can get one of those signs and put it in your yard, and it kind of just, sparks interest and, lets everybody else know that they can give as well, and we can get this playground built. So anyway, that's all I have. Thank you.
Have I gotten everybody now before I ask for a motion to adjourn? Commissioner Lucas, I will entertain your motion to adjourn again,
Motion to adjourn.
and we are adjourned. Thank you.